Hello and welcome to Fite Nite 2023. This is our first round of a tournament we have from across the globe today. Thanks so much for joining me. My name is Andre from the Metropole Grid, and I'm really excited for this event. But of course, I'm joined by the organizer this morning, or this afternoon, I reckon, by Princess Spacekin PSK. PSK, how's it going? Speaking of making it happen, we're going to be jumping into games in about 5 to 8 minutes, so don't go anywhere. We have some very exciting Netrunner. But for those who are not familiar with Fite Nite, this is something that's been going on for now a couple years. No audio? Oh, excuse me, 1 second. Oh. Hold on, for real? No audio? Okay, that's not good. 1 second, y'all. I have audio on my side. Okay. This is live, right? This is what's going to happen. Oh, I know what happened. Okay, this is good. Okay, PSK, say hi, please.
Hello, how are you doing?
Okay, stream delay. Let's see if we got it right this time. I'm doing good, by the way. Oh, thumbs up. Thank you, everyone. Oh, it's early in the morning here. Hopefully you're doing well. Okay, let's try that again from the top. This will all get cut out. Don't worry. Welcome back to 2023 Fite Nite Round 1. I'm joined by PSK, the organizer of this event. This is something that's been going on for a couple of years. You've been organizing this. And for those who are not familiar, can you explain kindly what is Fite Nite?
Yes, before I kind of took over the organizing, they already had some Fite Nites.
Mm-hmm.
It just like I really enjoyed the format, and I volunteered to do the TO, and then from there it just like kind of like I kept doing it.
Speaking of volunteered, it's worth shouting out that you were or a big part of organized play in Null Signal for the last couple years. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes, correct. And I'm back in a minor capacity.
Yeah.
But I missed it, so I just knocked on the door like, "Hey, can I come back, help you out a bit?" And they welcomed back, and I'm still doing some things now with them.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah, we missed you too.
Yeah,
you did. I know you did a lot of great stuff for organized play Null Signal. If I'm not mistaken, the whole Continentals, Intercontinentals, that is attributed to you. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a little bit. All the OP team that put the face on organized play during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
That was hard.
Yeah.
That was a hard thing to do. And I think that it's very nice that we're keeping it alive, because it gives the chance to people that maybe can't travel or they're more comfortable playing online to have their big events that they can participate in. And the intercons are always like fun to watch, like a little bit of like Netrunner as how do you say it, a spectacle?
Yeah,
Spectacle?
Exactly. Yeah. Which
that's how you say it.
There's a lot of people that appreciate that. And yeah, obviously everything going through the pandemic, all that sort of organized play online meant so much to so many people. So a huge thank you for that. But today it is something a bit different. This is Fite Nite. I'm going to pull up some deck lists in the background. Can you explain what this format is? Because this is a bit of a unique tournament structure.
Yeah, it's a tournament that it's like invitation only. Usually it's invitation towards the big playtesting groups, and it's a 4 versus 4 Netrunner tag team. We do one-sided matches. Every player is like linked into one runner deck and one corp deck. And sorry, probably you can hear me in the background.
Okay.
Getting clothes on, and babies do not like clothes in general.
So these are big testing groups from around the world. If you're not familiar with testing groups are, generally the idea is that these are groups of players who have come together with competitive goals in mind. So they're range. I'm not actually sure how big these groups are. I know SnareBears is about a dozen players. I'm not actually sure the size of Unband, but these are some of the top players from around the world who work together to try and produce competitive results. In fact, these two groups represent 2 world championships. Saka, there you see his deck list on the left, is the current world championship. SnareBears has a world champion and finalists from years before. So we're going to see some really high caliber, top tier Netrunner today.
Yes, this is like the football for net.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the structure, how does this work?
Yeah, the game in the format is like one-sided, either runner or core per player, and only one match is played at a time. At the beginning, each team captain, in this case Saka and Cable Carnage, will choose a player, and I will randomize what side they start playing with. The player that wins will stay, and the player that loses will be eliminated. And their team will consultate with each other, which is the next player they send out, and they choose what side they will play.
From that point on. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is some people get nervous about being on camera. And of course, all of this is going to be televised because there's only one game. Your whole team is watching you. The whole opposing team is watching you. You are the only player playing, representing your team versus the opponent's team. Again, it's single elimination. So if you drop your one game, you are out for today. So we saw some kind of, I'm going to say upsets. I know last year we saw from the SnareBears just a single player run through the entire gauntlet and never get off that top table, just played 4 games in a row and that was it. But that's what we're looking at today. It should be only 4 rounds if I'm not mistaken. I think that's how the math works out. And it's very important to know that this is only round 1 this year. There's going to be round 2 coming up in a bit. I don't think we have a date for that yet. And then in the future,
no, we don't.
The finalists from this, so whichever team comes up on top today will face off whatever team comes up from the second group. I believe the second group is the NWE versus the Process. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome. And so the 2 finalists will have they will match up again. The 2 teams will meet up for the final of a Fite Nite. But this is going to be really impressive Netrunner. It's also really exciting to me. I know Parhealing has just dropped the last cycle, set from the Null Signal Games team. And so we're seeing, obviously on screen, we have what is a Parhealing as decklist names, but we're seeing some of those new cards sneak in here. And this is the first, I think, big competitive high stakes tournament that we're going to see in the new modern standard format. So I'm really excited for this.
Right. Yes. So I'm gonna drop you here because I need to do some TO stuff. Like I'm receiving the first players.
Awesome.
I think you're gonna be very well accompanied, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for being such a pillar of the streaming Netrunner.
Oh, cheers. Thank you.
Always an honor to have you around.
That's very kind of you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
I'll be listening.
Yes.
Cheers.
Drop in whenever you'd like. Huge thanks for putting all this stuff together. Everyone's really excited for this. So we're going to have some good games. Awesome. So today I'm not going to be casting alone. I'm going to be joined by players from both teams. Right now I'm joined by 2 players. Firstly, I'm joined by Peter H, if I'm not mistaken, representing the Unband team. Peter, how's it going? Welcome.
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, can you describe a bit about yourself as a Netrunner player, maybe for those who are not familiar with Peter H? And we're going to talk about Unband in a second, but let's start with you. How's it? What can you tell me about you and Netrunner?
Sure. So I started playing just after System Gateway. I'm relatively new to Netrunner. And I met Brandon, aka the King, one of our Unband players. And we hit it off right away. And he said, like, a week or 2 after I met this guy, I got to get him on Unband. So he and I have played a ton of games together, probably over 200, 250 games of Netrunner played together. And I've not been going to tournaments yet with Unband, but I've been in the background doing, deck building and play testing games and sort of theory crafting kind of stuff.
Awesome. And so SnareBears has been a bit more of a known quantity for a longer period of time. I'm not actually sure how old Unband is. For me, it seems more of a recent thing. Is that true?
Yeah, Unband had a core of players that was around for quite a while. People like Saka and the King, Bridgman, Arndt, Rustrider, they were around for quite a while in sort of a group of about, 5-6 people. And then just earlier, well, I would say last year at this point, there was a big recruitment push for Unband, and we welcomed in a lot of new members. Me among them. I was sort of first of that wave, and Unband has now grown to, I think, just under 20 people are in our Discord. So yes, the expansion is very recent, but the core of the team has been around for quite a bit longer than that. So relatively new in terms of size and scope and ambition, I think.
That's a super cool thing to hear. Now, when it comes to making your own testing team, coming together with people, sometimes this feels like a bit of a closed doors. The outside not welcome. But it's really exciting to see that that's not always the case. I think actually most of the time that is not the case, and a lot of these teams are actually very excited to talk with new people and to get new perspectives. But Peter, thanks so much for joining me. We're going to jump into the Unband deck list and talk about that first. But of course, I'm also really stoked to be joined by Kizra. You might know as Kat Shen, an artist. Does a lot of stuff for No Signal Games. You might be appreciating their art. Kat, how's it going?
Hey, good morning. How's everyone doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for some Netrunner. How can you give a bit of an explanation of maybe who you are, and we'll talk a bit about the SnareBears after that.
I'm Kat. I do a bunch of art for Netrunner. I'm also more or less decent at the game. I think I've been playing since Data and Destiny.
Awesome. Yeah. I think just about everyone here has probably seen some of your art. Again, you have your cards up for sale on Make Playing Cards. Is that the easiest way if people want to find some of your alt arts?
I think so. Or find me in person at an event.
Lovely. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. Can you describe a bit about SnareBears for those who are not familiar? It's a name that's been around for, I would feel like 2-3 years. Maybe I'm incorrect about this. And they've had a fantastic, just about every year in competitive Netrunner has been a good year for SnareBears. Who are the SnareBears?
So the SnareBears was originally a team tournament Sovereign of Subways group of me, Scry, and Gronkov. And slowly over time, we just sort of assimilated more people that we knew until it became the team that exists now.
Is it there's a more represented North American team? I think there are some players who are playing outside of the Western Hemisphere, but that's the way I see it, at least. Is that by intention or just the way it happens?
I think it was just that people that we gradually met through like going to tournaments on the East Coast got assimilated into the group, and then people we knew from like going to Worlds, things like that. Like that's how we met Eric. We were testing with him for Worlds one year, and we just sort of like assimilated people from like who we met, who we got along with. So it's primarily East Coast just because this is like who we knew and who we had befriended over the years, but it's expanded a bit to Europe and a bit to Canada.
Awesome. Super cool. We're just about to jump into our first games. Again, in this format, everyone is required to represent not exactly a different faction. We do see an overlap, but different IDs. I don't know, Kat, can you speak a bit about some of the deck choices coming in today with the SnareBears? Obviously, it's a bit of an unknown meta with the new cards, but it looks like here we're not seeing anything too wild in terms of some of the archetypes.
We tended to pick decks that we were comfortable with. I think we found that a lot of the existing decks from pre-Parhelion were still very strong, such as the Sports Medals, such as the R+. I think the Egg Infusion and the Ob definitely are taking advantage of some of the newer cards for sure.
Egg Infusion was a force to be reckoned with at Worlds. We're seeing definitely a different build this year. It's not that sort of like low-key lockout deck. And we see two really big tools in this list. Firstly, we're seeing Dr. Vientian Keeling as an alternate win condition. It's an asset which, if you don't deal with it, it eventually will win the game. It is kind of like that super deep borehole, albeit it does not say those words win the game on it. And then we're seeing Nana's Civic Grid, which is such a very, very good upgrade in these Egg Infusion decks that are just inherently their ability fills their archives with those cards. Is there a certain... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, we found it to be a very strong card in testing, and it seems like Unband has also discovered that and agrees.
Yes, and on that note, Peter, we're looking at the Corp decks and Runner decks, and I think we see some more splashy inclusions, some wilder archetypes, you could say, when it comes to the Unbanned lists. Could you tell us a bit about what sort of decks, how they were selected for this? So was it so much a meta call, or was it more these are what the players enjoy playing? Because we do see a lot of players and see their kind of wheelhouse represented in these 8 lists.
Yeah, it's a little bit more the latter. We were really letting whatever players were playing sort of pick decks that they were most comfortable with. I think one example here that you're going to see is that our Ag Infusion is not on Keeling. It's Adol's list. It's a little bit more of a scoring plan. Adol said, this is the kind of deck I'm comfortable playing. He's a bit of a smoke and an Ag expert. And he said, can I play this list? And we all said, yeah, go for it. We trust you on that. So I think a lot of these lists will sort of encapsulate that sensibility. We have Brandon the King on his Apoc Mashiko, and you can see Saka piloting our Shaper, the probably the biggest bit that this tournament's seen so far. It's more up to the individual players here to run what they think is good. Obviously, we spend a lot of time internally testing these, but we just depended on everyone to pilot decks that they were comfortable with and they were excited to play.
Yeah, speaking of comfortable with, this 80 card Shaper deck. Now, we've been seeing these big deck lists, these big Cabinets of Wu. They're World Tree decks inherently. And the idea of World Tree is a new card that came out in Parhelion that gives you that sort of flexibility and that click compression to be able to pull cards from your deck and install them at instant speed. 3 credits reduction is immense. So we're seeing a lot of these decks get bigger and bigger and just filling them with economy, with value, and these tools. I think we were expecting from the SnareBears to see Deer playing their version, but they're on Hoshiko today. Janktivist is going to be playing the Route 66. I'm very interested to see the difference between 66 cabinets and 80 cabinets and to see if those extra 14 card slots, what they can do in these matchups. It's absolutely fascinating. I don't know. Have you all had a big chance playing against Cabinets of Wu? Because a lot of people are very afraid of this deck.
Yes, we've done a fair amount of internal testing. I sort of consider myself the internal Wu expert in our team, actually, and spent a fair amount of time talking to Saka about this list and what it's going to look like. There are plenty of notable differences between the two Wu lists, and I'm curious to see how it's going to pan out, actually, in the matches that we play. I hope that both of them get seen on stream. It is a very complicated deck. There are a lot of lines, as many as there are branches on that tree. And it's very mentally taxing. I think anyone who has played that Wu deck certainly has experienced that. But there's a lot of power there, especially if the deck gets going.
So speaking of the games, our matches are up. So you're seeing on screen, we have 2 matchups, and we're going to see a very interesting deck list. We are looking at, just give me 1 second to make sure that everything is working right. This is Analyze Chris playing Sports Metal, just very basic, I think, fast advance. I'm not sure we're seeing any of the new core damage cards, which I do think slot into these lists, but Sebastian K on the other side of the table. Sebastian K is a very interesting deck builder. A lot of creativity, a lot of that strange mustard here. And starting turn 1 with 2 environmental testings on the table is going to tell you what this deck is going to look like. This is a lot of hardware in this as list, a lot of tricks to get this stuff installed. I believe this is an endless hunger adjusted matrix list. And the question is whether icebreakers are the real problem Sebastian has to deal with, and how quickly can you set up a deck that wants to install a lot of cards. And Chris is off here. We should be able to show on screen. I think this, if I hit this, we should see the deck list real quick. Yeah, it looks good. Real quick, Peter, can you talk about Sebastian's list? Have you seen this in person? I think I've seen this on before. Sebastian piloting this deck. I think there's some changes.
I have heard of it. I will say this was pretty late in our decision for what we were going to play on the criminal side. I have not seen this in person myself, but we think it's probably the spiciest include, which is funny to say because you know how you have an 80 card runner deck on our side, and yet it's this criminal deck that we think is the most exciting. So I'm really pulling for Sebastian here. I think this is a very, very exciting and strange list. And you know, it's doing stuff that probably no other runner is really going to be trying to do. Adjusted Matrix, Endless Hunger, these are not going to be played in their mini faction. I mean, the rest of the deck also just a very interesting set of cards, I think. So I'm rooting interest aside. I think this is a fascinating deck to see work here.
Now, we've seen back in the days some of these lists that are kind of similar to as lists, some of these like Geist lists, which are now rotated out the standard format, but they actually had a very interesting game plan against Sports Metal. They had access to pulling things like Claude and Instant Speed to stop fast advance. They had access to things like Stargate for disruption, but I don't think Sebastian's deck is exactly this. And Chris is definitely going. We see the Tranquility on the table. That's a lot of economy over time, a lot of card draw. We have a Basture Boga in there set up for a fast advance, and this deck is going to be going as fast as possible. I believe we're looking at things like Audacity, Biotic Labors, as much fast advance. Chris wants to be able to close the game out in 6 to 7 turns.
Yeah, and I think the big question on the other side is how efficiently Sebastian can get these environmental testings off. When that card is installed and you get to get it up to 4 counters and pop it naturally, it's very good. You're clicking for basically 6 credits in the next turn or 2. But if you need to click for credits in order to then install your next piece of hardware or your next program because of that upfront 3 credit cost, it starts to look a little less appealing. So I think if Sebastian can get out a couple of cheap pieces of hardware here or play some other efficient cards and get that burst money from those 2 resources, he's going to be looking a lot better.
The interesting thing about this matchup is going to be if Sebastian can get set up fast enough to deal with the sports. The sports list is designed to go extremely fast. We were like, part of the idea behind it was that it could outpace, for example, World Tree Wu, so that just by an overwhelming number of assets as well as just pure speed. Although we don't have any ice at the moment, so...
Yeah, and this as list requires generally 2 big cards to set up really quickly. First, so we have the Prognostic Key Loop. That's really good. It allows you to clicklessly install stuff from the top of your deck as long as you want to pay that extra credit tax. But then a huge part of this deck list as well is the Masterwork. As this console gives you a cheaper hardware install, or technically a free... you don't spend the clicks on it if you're doing it while running, and there's going to be a fair bit of running in the Sports Metal matchup, but it gives you the extra card draw the first time a turn you install a hardware. And this is the sort of click compression that these as decks can kind of go, into orbit, where they start, smashing everything on the table before they're, they've really even spent a click. So Sebastian has some issues here. 2 Bass Chiribogas on the table to deal with. The flip switch is not going to exactly, maybe you can start face checking aggressively into a Gatekeeper or Drafter, but Chiriboga going to get cracked, and it looks like Chris is going to have 4 clicks here to score out an agenda.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important how quickly Sebastian is able to find that Wake Implant. This is one of those new Perihelion cards, which is going to be a key piece of multi-access here. Being able to get that charged up and installed early, especially against this iceless board, would do a whole lot to sort of stem the flow of agendas into HQ for the Corp. And I'm sure that he's digging for that right now.
Now, diversion of funds is technically a threat here. We know there's a Bass Chiriboga on the table, so Chris can always res that to duck the credit denial. And Sports Metal is one of the strange decks that can actually be pretty competitive, it can threaten out a lot, even on low credit thresholds. With Tranquilities on the table, you can score out from hand for free with a card like Audacity. You just install it, you get your money back, your Audacity, you're good to go. And now Chris is on 3 points. We only have to score 2 more agendas, and Sebastian K is on the cusp of starting to go really fast. These environmental testings need 4 power counters. You do get 1 anytime a program or piece of hardware is installed, and Sebastian's going to need that upfront money to start hitting the table. I'm not sure if we're going to see Miss Bones in this list. I can pull up the list itself, but that's the sort of card that you definitely want on this sort of board state with all the stuff you need to throw trash.
There is 1 Miss Bones in this Sebastian deck.
Okay. Oh, and there it is. Endless Hunger coming down, 0 cost 4 MU, the highest MU on a program ever printed. Now, this allows you to trash your cards to end the run, and that can be useful in a pinch with a lot of hardware you're installing. Maybe that's where the flip switch goes, but Adjusted Matrix is the card you want to attach to this. This is more so, I think, just to get the environmental testings pushed in the right direction.
Oh, this is interesting. We saw Chris let Sebastian trash the Spin Doctor just for the 2 credit tax to make him go to 0.
Chris here?
Yeah, that's definitely an appealing play on the Corp's part. The real question is if Sebastian is going to have any of his 1 credit pieces of hardware that he can install. Because if he can install one of those for the discount with ads, he's immediately going to shoot up to 18 credits.
There we have an install.
Ooh, that's a good score.
Bass is cracked. Project Vitruvius just a blank 3-2 here, and now Chris even on 0 credits with an Audacity in hand. We've been drawing cards with Sports Metal on I think the last 2 scores, so Chris probably has it here. Sebastian K has to likely give up on setting up on the table and just get enough accesses to force Chris off the point, but it's so difficult with Sports Metal drawing cards whenever an agenda is stolen.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this is one of the reasons that we've seen sports be such a popular ID over the course of the last year with the Borealis release. And it's one of the reasons that Unband, several of the members took it to Worlds, was because sports can just kind of get there sometimes. It's really hard to keep them off of 2 points compared to most other IDs. It's difficult to set up an R&D lock when they can draw through it. And they can score off of sometimes 1 or even 0 credits if you steal an agenda at the wrong time and give them the money they need for an advancement counter into an Audacity.
Now, Sebastian jumping up to 18 credits by installing that Boomerang, able now to pull down the 2 Tranquilities. And that might look like a bit too little too late, but that forces Chris this turn. Yep. And I don't think it's possible to score out. I think if with 1 credit you can do it, but with 0 you can't.
That was 100% the correct play there.
Yeah. With 1 credit, you can install an Audacity. With 0 credits, you're stuck for a turn off of it. But Chris is going to put a card in server 6. And again, there's a lot of smaller agendas in this list. So Chris actually doesn't mind if Sebastian comes in and hits centrals and steals a couple agendas, maybe gives Chris those cards or those the credits. But a card on the table, Sebastian, 10 credits. We're checking to see what server 6 is.
Stealing agendas here, potentially a little dangerous. It could draw Chris into the win.
Spin Doctor. Going to get that draw regardless. We saw one of those get trashed, and Chris doesn't need the recursion if he has all he needs in his hand. Sebastian only has 1 more click to interact with the board, but Spin Doctor now going to be removed from game to shuffle 2 cards from archives into R&D. A fair few options, a fair few face down cards.
Shuffling red level, shuffling Spin Doctor implies potentially that he doesn't have it, or he's anticipating something getting stolen, in which case he will need more cards.
Red level?
Yeah, the red level often feels pretty key to being able to break lock or draw quickly through your deck, especially because it lets you convert 1 credit into basically a clickless 2 draw. So it's very strong in these kind of race for the last agenda scenarios.
Sebastian drawing up, not getting access there in the last click, throwing out 2 here. Chris has a chance of having it in hand. Needs a 3-2 or 3-1 and Audacity. Red level clearance to start. Draw clicklessly. You can still get there with this card. You only need 1 credit if Audacity is your win condition here. Now you have some other options. It's a bit awkward on 1 credit, but you could always go for 2 Elevagao bifurcations. That's going to be a bit more expensive. You do get your money back when you score from Sports Medal, but server 7. And Chris is not going to be closing the game this turn. Sebastian K still in it. Has a chance to show us what that Apex Breaker can do. 3 on the table. What do you do here? How do you interact with this? It's so difficult. You don't have Disruption. You don't have Clot. You need to get really good accesses, and you need to shut down Economy, but with 3 cards on the table.
Yeah, the runner does feel pretty pressured to run here, I think. The concern is that if one of these cards in the remote is a Rashida, then another could be an agenda, and the Corp could be in a position to just never advance off the board from even a single credit. So Sebastian might be considering that kind of line and worried about whether or not he needs to check, maybe not all of these, but potentially some of these remotes, just to check out for that sort of burst money into the never advanced score plan.
Yep. In addition to that, if any of these cards on the board are agendas, it could very well just draw Chris into the win. This is a very difficult spot for the runner, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to interact regardless. And you saw last turn, Chris was drawing up, did not have it in hand, which means either that Chris is missing the Audacity, or Chris is missing a 3-2 or the last Mega Pre. Maybe there's a chance that you don't want Audacity out of hand. That is, to some extent, it was filtered with Spin Doctor, but maybe there's too many agendas to go throw in archives. I think with the runner on 0 points, you might still consider throwing out an agenda late in hand. But Chris clearly doesn't have the Audacity fast event straight up, so we're checking server 9 here. Sebastian, 8 credits. He's going to be able to trash anything. Q loop triggers as well here again. First time the run begins. It's a Gaslight. Whoa.
That was our 1 Parhelion edition.
What is Parhelion? Gaslight, a really, really powerful card for 1 influence. Nothing to res gives you an operation from R&D. You have to reveal it, but a Hyperloop is going to be stolen in server 8. That could be up to 5 credits. We're going to get 3 and 2 cards, putting Chris closer to potentially those last points he's looking for.
Yep.
That was exactly the kind of agenda that the runner doesn't want to hit here. It brings them only 1 of 7 points closer to actually closing the game out, and it gives the Corp an enormous amount of gas. With the draw 2, that's basically the same as having fired that Rashida from the board.
Awake coming down for some multi-access to build up on R&D, but an Elevagao found in HQ here. We have 1 more click to go back. The draw 2. Hyperloop again. That's going to take you to 3 points, but Chris now has enough money to biotic labor if necessary.
That puts Chris into biotic money.
Technical writer. It's a Rashida.
Rashida.
3 cards, 3 credits. Rashida, one of the strongest cards in the standard format. It looks like install advanced, just Audacity, throwing out 9 cards or what have you, and that is the last Vitruvius. That'll be the first win. Again, Chris representing SnareBears will take the first win against Sebastian K. Sebastian K had one of the coolest decks I think we were all excited to see, but unfortunately, against a matchup this fast, if you don't have the tools to slow it down, you might run into some issues. So that is game 1. As fast as that is, that's probably our fastest matchup, but we might just see Chris play a bunch of Sports Medal going forward. Who knows? Good game.
Yeah, good game.
Yeah. I think the deck that Sebastian brought looks very interesting, and it definitely would be very strong against decks that run ice.
All right, I think we're back. Okay, you can hear me. Thank you. The stream went down, excuse me. It looks like my OBS crashed. We have some warnings about unstable connection at this point. Sorry about that. So bear with me. I'll try and stitch this together for the YouTube COD, but if you're watching live, you get to see how it works. We saw conclusively the end of that match, right? Like that made it through one take, right? Did Sports Medal win 3 other games while we were gone? No, but we're about to. Okay, we got the end. Okay, we're about to jump into round 2 in just a second. I believe our team captain now picks the next matchup. Is that? I think that's how it's working. Excuse me,
I believe the losing team picks the next matchup.
Okay. So the team captain, which is Saka from Unband, gets to pick up the next matchup. We do know that Unband will be playing into Analyze Chris. So that's either the Sports Medal Fast Advance matchup, Double Audacity, nothing too special, but very, very quick, or the Freedom Kamalo deck, which is very close to the Liberté, Égalité, Humidité deck from Worlds. I'm not actually sure if it's changed much. I think I see 2 guinea pigs, which is a really nice splash.
Chris is very fond of guinea pig.
Yeah, I've heard. I think that came up in the conversation of that Yasengren put up on his channel about what each player from SnareBears thought about the list. I'm excited to see that card that forces you to discard your hand.
Chris's spicy splashes are guinea pig and labor rights. Labor rights, I think, very strong now just for the pinhole threading, especially against decks like R+.
Oh, wow. Yeah, just to recur those, huh? So the Reality Plus deck we saw become incredibly competitive at probably the last major events before Parhelion came out. It's the UK Nationals, and while it did not exactly win, so much of the top tables was how is your game around this sort of Drago Reality Plus deck that's kind of a bit of a prison deck. It's not exactly trying to score out very aggressively. It's trying to put you in a position where those Drago tags connect. And you'll see that, like, if you look at the Unbanned Runners list, No Free Lunch shows up as a 3 of in basically every list. The As list is a bit different, and while it has access to other tag tech, it kind of with Flip Switch, it doesn't exactly work always the way you want. It's clear that this is something that all the decks in the meta are trying to respect. They're trying to respect and deal with those tags. So we'll see how much they matter. I do think it was SnareBears that did bring one of the R+ decks. I think Unbanned brought Controlling the Message, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, it's Reality Plus on both sides. So actually very similar lists. All right, looks like our game is on. We're going to just jump into the game. So this is round 2. Excuse me for the technical difficulties, but we should be back up. And it looks like it's going to be a fast one too. We have one of the fastest decks in the format. Again, we just saw Analyze Chris on Sports Medal, 44 cards stacked up against Saka, playing 80 cards with Cabanessa Wu. Timer has just started. We're on round 2. With 80 cards in the deck, which are the important cards for this matchup? Because we're on Dancing turn 1. Show me Illuminal. Oh, just a Vitruvius. There you go. 2 points to throw your whole hand up. Draw 2. Damn, I'm good from Chris. It's always the good start there.
This is definitely going to be an interesting matchup. I'm very excited to see how Saka chooses to pilot the Wu here. A really key card, I think, in this matchup for him is going to be Conduit, which in 80 cards you might think is a little hard to find, but World Tree definitely helps out with that. And one of the strengths of this tree deck is going to be its ability to delete ice. Not actually delete ice in the way of Hippo, but install breakers and something like Turbine that are just really efficient at getting through a whole bunch of, wow, that's pretty good.
Boy. That's a spicy start from both of them.
Damn, they're both good. So if you haven't seen these before, you might be wondering, what is an 80 card runner deck doing competitively? And the whole thing here, the big thing here is World Tree. It's a card that Cabanessa can produce from her deck. Not directly. You generally pull a self-modifying code and make that into a World Tree. And that makes all these runs, allows you to trash your cards to get other cards. So we're going to see things like Clot hit the table. Simul Chips can show up to start threatening the Clot on top of that. And again, Conduit to close out. But install Advance, Elevagao, just a blank 2-1, D-Res, nothing. Is just good enough. Both players on 3 points. Saka has a really good start, it seems. Nuke on the table. Got some good card draw. I feel like there's some really ugly hands you can draw with these sort of decks, especially with 80 cards. It's just a bunch of tech cards for matchups you don't need.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that we definitely thought about a lot in deck construction was what your opening hand looks like. If you have 5 pieces of economy in your opening hand with World Tree, you have pretty good odds to win the game. If you have 5 pieces of miscellaneous tech, not looking so good. So you can see some inclusions in the list like Peace in Our Time, Sure Gamble, the card that I know Deer has talked about in their write-up that I think went up about a week ago on their World Tree list, Spec Work, which is mostly only good in turn 1 or 2, but that's really just when you need the good economy cards. So Saka with the opening hand of 2 Dirty Laundries and a Nuka is probably feeling pretty good about that. Can easily convert that 10 credits into a World Tree if the runner so desires, and then either sell this Nuka or sell something else. And there's a Flameout.
Yep, this is a very good start for Saka.
So Flameout gives you 9 credits to use on a hosted program. We're going to see that SMC go into the program itself. It's important while you use self-modifying code to install a program from your stack. Probably going to be a world tree here. Maybe we'll see something else. You can use the 2 credits from Flameout to pay the 2 credits self-modifying code cost, but that 6 credits are coming from pocket. Dr. Nuka getting world treed away. We're going to get basically any resource from this deck. I'm not sure if Saka's on things like Proco or some of the more expensive ends, but here just things like other Nukas, daily casts, Earthrise Hotel for 1 credit is quite good.
It's a very good pick here, yeah.
And you're going to see that a lot. You're going to see cards like this that have a shelf life, right? Like Nuka, you can click her once as a diesel, then sell her. Daily cast, you don't want that forever. Pawn Shop, Aesop's Pawn Shop, also very popular in these decks, but not every board state wants them equally. So we'll see these cards come and go, which is always really exciting. Chris, 2 cards on the table?
We're seeing these installs come out from the corpse side, and I think it's really important at this point to emphasize one difference between the SnareBears World Tree list and the Unband World Tree list, which is the inclusion of Miss Bones.
Whoa!
I think, yep, between the 2 decks, 15 cards, whatever, you're playing World Tree. But Miss Bones, I think that's the biggest difference between these 2 lists. Forget the Reaver, forget the Harbinger, which is there in one and not the other. Miss Bones is enormous for World Tree. You can install it for free immediately before you access the cards you want to trash. You can spend 11 credits off of it, leave it with just a single credit left, and then sell the Miss Bones for something else. So it's an enormous amount of value if your opponent's going to say, try to install Tranquility Home Grid and get some sort of economic pressure off of that.
And that's like the bonkers power to World Tree is like your deck can be just a huge pile of one of singleton cards for specific matchups for specific board states. And it's hard for the corporation to play around that. Obviously 80 cards. What can you play around? So we'll see if this telework becomes a Miss Bones here. That might be the play. It looks like it's going to become. Yep. There she is. 12 credits to trash stuff.
Tranquility.
Coming in for server 4. 2 Tranquilities down, such immense value. 2 influence, and that's sometimes the thing. 2 influence isn't a lot, but sometimes you feel bad spending a lot of influence on a card in your deck, a singleton you might not draw. Not exactly Miss Bones, but the fact that World Tree can guarantee you draw these cards, you're going to see some bigger stuff here. But Audacity on the table, that's going to be a mega pre, and while the first one is in Saka score area, now this one is worth 2 points, so Chris is on game point once again on turn 4.
Yeah. So the thing here is that I believe our deck only runs 2 Audacity. So without any recursion, Saka has a decent amount of time to grab some remaining points.
Yeah, the other way we're fast advancing, it's Bass or Biotic, right?
Correct. So I think Saka actually feeling relatively safe here, honestly. There's not a whole lot Chris can do without recurring Audacity.
So what are those big points? Yeah, Biotic Labor is you're going to need 7 credits. 6 credits maybe you have a red level clearance. And Bass is, I think, the same, but you need a red level, right?
Yeah, you need a red level or you got to stick the Bass on the table, correct. Which in this situation is probably not going to happen.
So we'll see here, keeping Chris's credits down is super important. We haven't seen a Biotic yet, but Saka also has access to Claw on the list. You have to get it on the table. You can't just pull it with Cabinet. So generally you pull something like a Harbinger or any other program you'll get value from, and then you World Tree it on your first run. But Saka has a lot of options here. There's a lot of face down cards as well. Some of that was from the Audacity turn 1. There's a fair few cards in there. It's just kind of scary sometimes when you run and you steal a bunch of little agendas, some Elevagaos, and then Chris suddenly has Biotic money.
Curious if we're going to see, if or when we're going to see the Conduit come down.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, with on the table, that's a big threat. Might be right here, actually.
Seems like now.
Yeah.
They fly otherwise.
Yeah. Kevin has pulling that Mayfly. Not long for the world. Living shorter even than the Mayfly is expected. Conduit is going to be swapped in at instant speed before the run. So you get that counter before the run's successful, excuse me. So this builds up faster and faster. And this is R&D lock. We're going to see it.
I think R&D locking Sports actually extremely difficult due to the ability of Sports to draw. And there's a non-zero chance that if he hits enough Hyperloops, that gives Chris scoring money.
But 3 cards in, still seeing nothing. Now, this is where R&D lock is so important, is we know that Chris doesn't have an agenda in the next 3 cards. So if Chris wants to spend his whole turn drawing up, that's just going to show Saka more and more cards deeper down. It's really hard. You generally need a shuffle effect. Purging is not very relevant when R&D is wide open, and Chris barely has money to even consider ice. Albeit a single piece of ice would start to be a problem until Saka can, I don't know, maybe overclock that flame out into an endurance. I think that's probably the next permanent breaker step.
Yeah, definitely. And this, you say, still has not seen anything on top. That's, I think, good for the runner here. With
Agreed.
3 credits on this conduit, with 3 counters on this conduit, excuse me, it means that Saka has basically established lock for a turn. And every turn that he buys with World Tree is an enormous amount of value.
Agreed.
That first run that he makes every turn is basically 3 clicks or 3 credits, a click to find the card, and a click to install it. So he's getting something like 5 default clicks worth of value on his first run each turn against uniced servers. So if he just drags this game out, 2, 3 more turns, he can find a clot, he can put that on the board, he can get his endurance down, he can set up simul chips. And if he manages to do that, then this game could get locked up pretty quick.
Now I take is this deck on, sorry, is it on multiple endurances? We just see one hit the bin, but I'm assuming we want the cheaper one from deck.
There are 3 endurances in the deck, yes.
That makes sense. Okay, so that means that Saka can still consider it again. If you have something like an overclock, you can use those 4 to 5 credits to sell the flame out to get the endurance down. But Chris here, an upgrade on R&D. Giardano Memorial, I think, is the one we're expecting.
Mavirus.
Oh, Mavirus too?
No, it can't be Mavirus. Or it might be Mavirus. It definitely wasn't a card that he drew off R&D then if it was Mavirus.
Giardano, I think, is 3 to trash, right? So maybe Saka saw that. Maybe it was just an HQ, but we have 1 card on the table, 1 upgrade on R&D, and there's not that many options on this list. I think Mavirus would technically buy you a bit of time.
Yeah, Giordano buys a little bit of time, but not much.
So Saka now, 4 clicks.
Giordano, yeah.
Yeah, Giordano, you can miss bones, but you're going to have to pay, I believe it's 2 credits for every agenda in your score area, so it's a bit of a speed bump, not a permanent solution.
Yeah, so the interesting question for Saka here is in what order he wants to run these servers. Checking server 6 seems prudent, but if that's a Hyperloop, it's pretty unfortunate. You're giving the corp a lot of gas there. Yeah, however, if it is a Hyperloop, you get your World Tree trigger at the time that you want, maybe sell the flame out. Running R&D is probably not good as a first click. You're either going to hit the Mavirus or you're going to hit that Giordano Memorial Field. Now, interesting note about hitting Giordano, it is one of the very few upgrades that triggers on successful runs, not on approach of the screen, which means you still get the World Tree, you still even get the Conduit counter, I believe.
Yeah, you should.
So Saka not necessarily prevented from gaining value from that run, even if it doesn't generate any accesses.
Now, if there is a Mavirus on the table, that kind of changes the line, and I don't think Saka's in a big pressure to produce clot immediately on this table, but it's a sort of thing that you want to flush out before you spend time getting a clot onto the table. You also have Miss Bones, a bit of an awkwardness potentially here. If you run server 6 and you trash something with Miss Bones, that's beyond the World Tree trigger, so you might not get full Miss Bones value this turn unless Saka wants to World Tree something else, which you saw the Earthrise go down there, and that's, sometimes you play Padma and you're trying to run R&D to make sure your Earthrise stays forever, but there are some decisions here, whether we wanted to pull the Conduit at the cost of, losing that resource that you can cycle, but Saka has a lot of options here, just not a lot of credits.
One card here that would be very good here, I think, would be Pinhole. The only problem is finding that in an 88 card deck. Sorry, 80 card deck.
Yeah, that's usually the issue.
Yeah, so Pinhole, if server 6 is the Spin Doctor, would potentially flush out the Spin Doctor because Chris will have to res and use it to prevent potentially losing it. And it also lets him check R&D without potentially having to pay 4 credits for Giordano.
I think it's 4, and then you trash it with Miss Bones if she sticks, right?
Exactly.
Now this is interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
We saw 3 cards on the top of R&D. There was 2 in HQ, so some of this might be unknown information, but we have to remember, of course, Saka does know the next 2 cards and knows what was drawn, which, we're taking a deep think here. I don't know if these are timed rounds. I'm always excited to see players, find the best line, even if it takes them a while, so.
We have 40 minutes. This is a sports deck. I think we'll be good.
We'll make it. The Conduit's only going to get bigger. Sports is going to get faster. There's a no free lunch. Not so much. Maybe actually just for the money. Yeah, there you go.
Just for the money.
I was wondering if Saka was taking the moment to calculate not necessarily what the statistical line he's looking for is, but in classic Saka, I'm going to be an accountant of Netrunner fashion. What is the most efficient way to spend my clicks this turn? Because that's going to be really important against sports. One thing that is not in this list is the Basilar Synth Gland, which has been, I think, in and out of various World Tree lists that we've tested. It would be pretty strong here because you don't care about the core damage, and getting an extra click every turn against sports is pretty good. Sells off the Miss Bones.
Just for a cast
daily
there.
Cast?
free value, I reckon. Spin Doctor from the top of R&D.
Ooh,
upgrade
that's big.
is a Giordano. We're not rezzing that. We're just allowing the Mistbones. Now it's trashed. Saka needs to pay.
So that's Mavirus.
Oh, the Giordano was from R&D, excuse me, and the Mavirus was on R&D or in the root of the server, excuse me. So Saka now in 0 credits, but the conduit has been reset. Can still build it up.
This is actually a very good hit for Saka. The Spin Doctor in particular.
Not checking server 6 though. There's a chance that Saka knows what that was off the top. I'm not so sure what you're worried about. Spin Doctor's a bit ugly. It could always just be an agenda.
Yeah. Rashida would be a bit grim.
Yeah. But I love seeing this rotary deck flying low to the ground, right? Like this deck only forces so many problems. They're very big problems to deal with, right? But it's not so much like, do you have the economy to do this and this and this? Saka looks maybe ran into an issue here. Gonna have to discard one card.
I think he did not use conduit for his last run there.
Oh yeah, he made a run on R&D. Yeah.
Oops.
So conduit is unlike medium. If you've been playing back from the original core set, it requires the click to be spent on the conduit itself. So if you just run R&D and you don't click conduit, it happens all the time on Jinteki.net, let alone in person as well. This can happen. Looks like we're just gonna roll that back, which is absolutely real sporting.
Yeah, this is the kind of mistake that probably doesn't happen in person, but can definitely happen on.
Yeah, actually, you're right. Yeah, in person, there's no way to do that wrong. Well, you could forget, but yeah, I think we're just gonna do and run it back. Chris saying yes. Okay. So we're gonna do a click again. We're gonna see 3 cards here, not just one off the top. That's really important. We trashed 2 cards here, so this is actually 3 new cards, if I'm not mistaken.
There's the conduit run.
3 from the top. No steal.
Still no agenda. Is interesting.
No trash. They're joking about the Vitruvius on the table anyways, right? And Chris has 3 credits here. In theory, it could be the game if that Vitruvius is brave out there, but I'd be surprised if that's the way this game ends.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, sometimes you got to make bold plays, and it wouldn't be completely wild for Chris to have tossed out a 2-pointer there. I mean, there's Saka really is going to feel like the game is on R&D here, one way or another, and this would be one way to sneak it out without having to get your credits up or get one of those audacities back.
So Chris thinking out again, this is a hard corner to get yourself out of. That conduit bearing down on you. You're just not going to be able to draw into the agenda. Now, Saka might know that Chris has some amount of fast advance pieces in hand. And of course, if you run later in the turn and you do get, an agenda stolen, Sports Metal can draw up. But the fact now that we're seeing the 4th card, the 5th card, even if Chris draws up on a deep dig on R&D, he's not going to get anything new into his hand that Saka hasn't seen, which is a problem. Chris is clicking for credits, and we might see an ice on R&D. Might have to force out an issue, the icebreaker issue, the endurance, and there you go. A first piece of ice that we've seen this entire event.
Yeah, so Saka's real question here is going to be, how does he want to deal with this piece of ice? I'm sure that everyone on Unband has already looked over all the SnareBears lists and talked about them. And the main thing to note is he's not going to need Cleaver for this. I think if he sees Meridian, he's probably just going to take the -1. Given that the Giordano is already dealt with and there are no other barriers for him to worry about. So the main thing are going to be Gatekeeper and Drafter. He probably cannot let any of those fire. So he is going to have to fetch some breaker here to deal with these.
Yeah, so I'm going to think this one out. Again, you can hard call your breaker. You can also just pull a Mayfly. Now credits will be an issue. Gatekeeper is a massive 6 strength to turn its res.
So expensive.
Drafter, again, you're paying, I believe, 4 credits to break all of that with the Mayfly you produce for 0. It's actually interesting too. MU is a problem. You can't actually pull MU Mayfly on this board state. So you're probably going to have to commit to a breaker. I think ideally it's the endurance, which solves so many problems with a single card, classic endurance. We'll see here. Saka has to think. You have the daily cast you want to sell. I do think we're going to end up selling the flame out sooner than later.
I agree. Saka definitely needs a little more MU for dealing with ice.
And these decks run a lot of MU cards. I think Deer's version that I'm a bit more familiar with is running things like Cyberdelia shows up as a bit of a control card. You have that neutral one that gives you plus hand size as well. And you just need MU because there's so much things you want to install. We're talking about a K2CP turbine list, right? Like there's a lot of stuff you want to get down.
Yeah, this MU crunch is actually one of the reasons why the Unband team decided to cut the Reaver from their list, and along with it, ultimately the Harbingers and the Aesop's Pawn Shop. MU is just really valuable, and installing, for example, a Reaver just eats up another one of your World Tree triggers that has to go find a piece of MU hardware, and then eats up another card that you have to install. So it slows you down more than you'd think, and spending 2 flat MU for the World Tree is kind of a difficult ask sometimes. Oh, and it's the Meridian. This is not good for Chris.
Yeah, that's a speed bump for 3 credits. Now you can either give the Corp 4 credits and end the run, which is a bit of it's a good subroutines. However, you can just add this as a -1 agenda point to your score area, and while it definitely lowers the amount of agendas Saka has and forces Saka to run a bit further, when you're bearing down on R&D with Conduit, it's just a matter of time potentially. I think we missed a Conduit run.
No, Meridian is glitched.
Oh,
so we Chris is just giving Saka a workaround, so we don't have to deal with that error.
Cool. There's that second daily cast coming down again. Clickless value from your deck installed. We're going to see, I think, 4 cards here. We have 2 cards of trash stuff. That means you can start trashing Rashidas and Spin Doctors. We're seeing 4 cards, no steal, no trash. And Saka can just go back.
Interesting.
It's hard to imagine seeing 4 cards on R&D and not stealing anything in a sports medal list, let alone trashing.
This is a very strange distribution for the sports list.
It
makes me wonder how many are in archives.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is Silver 6 a Spin Doctor protecting gun archives?
So Hyperloop is probably the best hit for Chris there.
Chris getting the money back that he spent resing the Meridian, drawing 2 cards. And again, those are cards that Saka has seen. They're not cards beyond the card access. They're just the top 2 cards of R&D. So this means that Saka can go back and actually see 3 new cards in theory. It's a bit risky sometimes to do the last click, but again, if you know what Chris can draw on from the top of R&D, Saka can just slam it here.
I think Saka would be seeing 4 new cards because he saw 5 on this last breach. 1 was the Hyperloop, and then 2 more were drawn up, and he has 5 cards in his Conduit. So it would be a deep, deep dig into R&D if he runs here.
Right.
How many viruses is the list on? Because that's like, you know, buys you a bit of breathing room. Obviously 1 in archives. If you hit 1 naturally on R&D, that saves you a turn.
So Chris, knowing that would be a very deep dig, still chose to draw cards. Whereas if he took 2, he would go up to Biotic Money. So that's a very interesting play.
Now for Chris to threaten out an agenda, it means the 1 card that he kept on HQ 2 turns ago has to be an agenda. And he kept it as a 1 card HQ. Because there's no way that Chris has drawn to agenda since then, right? Brandon screaming at me to click Conduit. Saka thinking here again. If Silver 6 is a Spin Doctor, if you do force a shuffle somehow, you're going to go see a lot more cards on R&D. Not this turn exactly, but it's absolute disastrous. There's a chance that you have to let the Spin Doctor go with a Conduit. And hey, Brandon is winning this one. Just win. Seeing a lot of new cards here. Saka calling this a risky run to some extent. Yeah, it forces the credit differential to the break point of Biotic Labor. But you do know a lot of the stuff. 2 old, 4 fresh.
Yeah, I think another reason that Saka may be wanting to make this run here is that the Corp can break lock with 2 credit or 2 clicks. Their natural draw would draw them the first scene card. Then they could click once to draw the other scene card, and then they could break lock their next click and still have a click left over. And I think that's a very scary prospect for Saka.
So Chris has been taking cards instead of money here.
Yeah, deeper and deeper we go with those cards. Again, maybe Chris is just missing something. He knows he's not going to be drawing into agendas here. Saka seeing 2 more there at the end. A Mega Pre was stolen. That's just a 3-1 in the score area. It's already online. Saka thinking, it looks like we've accessed something at the bottom that's worth considering trashing, whether it's Rashida or Spin Doctor. That's probably the decision point here. I think Spin Doctor is the more interesting thing.
Yes, I think so. I'm curious what the cards on the table or in hand are that Chris wants to be on 5 credits. A Bass and an RLC. Scores from 5, I believe. Assuming server 6 is Bass.
Oh, assuming it's Bass, right?
6, yeah.
There's no Audacity left in the deck. Trying to draw into Audacity seems risky from shuffling and the spin. So it seems like he has something that says, I don't need Biotic.
And the cards he's drawing into, like in terms of non-trashing, sure, they could be things like Tranquility Home Grids for 4, which Saka doesn't or isn't able to trash. But yeah, there's a chance, like red level clearances, I don't think we've seen any yet. We've seen one so far, excuse me. But you're right, there is a narrow case here again, and I think so much of this hinges on the one card kept in HQ 3 or 4 turns ago has to be a 3-2 agenda for Chris to be able to close the game this turn.
Right. So something that I think is also interesting is that Saka chose to get daily casts instead of Plot.
Yeah, for Clot, you have to trash a program though, right? So you'd Cabinessa, you still could do it. It's just a bit trickier.
Right. You could Cabinessa for SMC, run, get the Clot.
I think you'd have to pull out a 1MU, but yeah, you'd pull anything,
sure,
right?
Sure.
Like a misdirection or what have you.
Sure.
Yeah. I think this goes back to Saka's inclination to be an accountant control player. He probably doesn't want to spend doing that. That's a little bit more of the kind of scrappy, low to the ground play. I'm going to think about my tactical concerns for this next turn. Saka's very much the kind of player to think about, the next 3, 4, 5 turns, the kind of big picture. And I don't think he really wants to pull the plot now, force the purge, and then put himself back in a position to just be conduiting again. I'm not sure that gets him the kind of tempo that he's really looking for in this game. Just walking through Saka's thought process there, from what I'm familiar with. But it's definitely an interesting decision whether or not he pulls the clot, and when he pulls the clot, because it almost certainly forces a purge.
Having a turn of just sitting there for the corp to purge is not terrible for Saka.
For sure.
It's weird. It feels to me like it just pushes the issue down the road, right? Like you still are going to bear down the conduit. I don't think Saka sees any new cards this turn, which means that Saka can set up. You're no longer, like, you're not threatening fast events any more than the previous turn. This is definitely really tricky, and it's worth noting Chris's list doesn't have any shuffle effects, right? There's no sprint, there's no simulation reset. Like Chris just has to break lock somehow. Spin Doctor would be the only way, right?
Spin Doctor is his only way.
Beat him in the remote, but Chewy's on the table. Yeah, server 6, like Spin Doctor or Bass, but it's just a purge. Putting that conduit down to 0 counter so Saka can go back, run R&D. I think we see 4 cards that were seen last turn, but probably still the thing to do anyways, considering it generates the threat. It allows you to world tree away a daily cast into something maybe better. Maybe you do pull the clot here, but Chris says there's only one way to find out. Check server 6. Saka 4 clicks, 6 credits, and 56 cards to pull from.
Tempting play from him, I would think, would be selling the flame out at this point for the endurance. He has the credits to afford it. It puts him down to 3, which means he can still trash, say, Rashida or Spin Doctor if he were to find them somewhere. Unlikely if he's just running with Conduit, but that gives him the MU to then play around with Plot or pulling the Mayfly if he needed, or any of his other programs. And if he wanted to later, he could just, sell the endurance for the simul chip. So I'm curious what he's going to be using World Tree for here, and my expectation would be selling the flame out or something.
Yo, this is hot nonsense, but have you ever seen a Cabinessa self-modifying code for a self-modifying code?
Before, actually.
Right? Because that is a line that threatens Clot without threatening Clot. Like, without producing Clot, right? As long as you have the MU.
I've used that exact technique to dodge a kill deck just to get the Reaver draw off the SMC trash.
Yeah, infinite card draw. All right, Saka, thinking about running archives again. We see a card on the table. Could be a Spin Doctor, but there's a lot of cards in here. Now, Saka didn't want to run it the turn previously because Mavirus will reset the conduit. But on this turn, the water is warm. Flame out, going to be trash. We're going to get a simul chip, and we see 2 extra points in there, 2 hyperloops. I'm into it, says Chris. That is a lot of money. 6 credits, let alone 4 more card draw or 4 credits, some mixture thereof. But we see 2 Spin Doctors are out, 1 Biotic is out, and a fair bit of ice.
Yep. We see 1 Biotic in the bin.
So Chris here gained 2 credits on the first steal. On the second steal, he's deciding here, but Saka's on game point, thinking on draw. Now, that does put the conduit a bit deeper. Saka does know what Chris is going to be drawing into here.
Very risky here.
But both players on game point.
Saka, given how much he's seen of R&D, almost certainly knows whether or not Chris has that biotic in hand at this point. And given there's 3 biotics in this list and only 18 cards left in R&D, there's a high likelihood of that. So Saka has a fair amount of information that we don't actually to evaluate sort of what the situation here is and what the likelihood of a fast advance is. And it really comes down to, I think, that last card that was in HQ that Saka didn't see at one point, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, there's one card that snuck through. Server 6, by the way, I'm pretty... Oh, not necessarily unknown, but might be unknown. Might have been one of the 2 cards in HQ. Again, that was the turn after. Virus Purging, and now Saka did pull out the Simul Chip. And now this on its own, there's no clot in the heap, but that means you can trash one of your installed cards to pull self-modifying code to pull a clot.
Yep.
So Chris is going to have to play around that. And if you are playing around clot, mind you, clot is a virus that says agendas can't be scored the turn they're installed. Your only way around that is getting something like a virus on the table, which Server 6 could be. If you want to get that clicklessly, you need a red level clearance, but that's harder and harder. Just win the game easy peasy. We're going R&D. Conduit. Seeing a card.
So the way you get around clot in this deck is you RLC to install a virus and gain a credit. I mean, gain a click back.
Yeah.
It makes your score significantly more expensive because you need to pay 3 credits for the virus as well.
Trashing Rashida. We're seeing 2 new cards here. This might be unknown territory. It's a bit tricky to track. Unknown. Again, there was a Rashida there. Saka putting out a frown. Looks like that might not be it. And Chris, I think, only has 1 card that's been safe from Saka's hands.
What is happening?
Some wild plays here. We're just hoping. Just praying.
I know. And look how blazingly fast this game has been. Chris is just starting turn 8.
Mavire's bottom card, red level to draw 2. Again, there is the threat. You still have to respect Clot here, and Chris knows that. So to be able to score out is quite difficult. You're going to need the last Mavirus. Fast break is going to be a big start here. Gain.
That's how you get out of R&D lock.
Gain, what is this? 7 credits? Draw up to 7 cards. R&D lock has been broken. 7 cards left in R&D, and Chris now can install any amount of cards. Well, 7 cards. That's largely going to be what he needs all in one server. So we're going to need the Mavirus. We're going to need an agenda. We almost definitely have the biotic now, but that fast break is exactly the break that Chris needs here. Where the Mavirus is, whether it's server 6, whether Chris has it in hand, that is the interesting question. And while you could build an ice remote server here, I don't think that's going to cut it because Saka now has an open R&D, let alone HQ might have a couple agendas in it. So 2 cards on the table that looks like it could just be an agenda and a Mavirus.
Yep. Finding the second server is pretty big.
Yep. If servers...
Spin Doctor.
Oh, that's scary.
Now
but this could be double biotic here for the score.
Yeah, he's
double biotic with Mavirus in the remote.
You still have some options here. And it is a Mavirus. Okay. Chris just needs double biotic. You can also Spin Doctor back into Audacity and do something, but a single biotic, it looks like we might have it here. Install on the table. Advance. GG. Wait. GG? This is a 2. Is this just an Elevagao?
Huh?
I think Chris might have goofed it. Yeah, he did. He forgot the biotic first. Oh no.
The second biotic.
Yeah, but sometimes it's really easy.
That's a biotic twice.
Yeah, you forget that it takes a click to do the biotic. You just understand that it gives you clicks.
He's offering the action, but
we're gonna
can't really do much with the res Mavirus on the board.
Trashing the World Tree with the Simul Chip, getting the Clot on the table, a triple advance. The Mavirus gonna purge virus counters, clearing that Clot away, and there is the Vitruvius.
Chris got it.
What a game! Nice. Whoa, 32 minutes.
Was quite a game.
Absolutely.
That was
those are very tense games. Certainly.
Yeah. It was both an extremely fast and extremely slow game.
Yeah, so wild. Imagine being on that side of the table as a corp, right? Bearing down that conduit turn and turn again, keeping your cool, realizing that there is a very narrow line for you to get out of this. And obviously, if it's just one more axis, there was a Calvin on the table. That biotic wasn't necessary, funny enough. The second one, at least, right? Absolutely wild. That was turn 8. Still really fast, but a lot of thinking goes into get there. It's absolutely fantastic. Well played to both players. It looks like Chris is going to stay up there. I'm not actually sure what side we're going to see Chris playing. Again, obviously Chris brought a runner deck and a corp deck. There's a chance we might see both sides of that. But Chris is still going to stand there, and it's going to take one of the 2 remaining players of Unband to try and dethrone Chris. Again, this is single elimination. Players are all playing different decks, and we have 2 teams here of international players, some of the best players Netrunner has ever produced, facing off today in Fite Nite. Absolutely phenomenal game. We have 2 more rounds today. If I'm not mistaken, we might be changing out some of the people here on the mic. Kat, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have your voice on this channel. Again, I'm going to shout out, go check out, it's Kisra on Make Playing Cards, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right, check it out. Kat has some great alt arts you can buy. And we might be joined, I think, from another player from SnareBears. If this is Big Unit. This is Jonas. How's it going?
That's me. How's it going?
Hey, thanks so much for joining. So you played a bit of Fite Nite last year, huh?
I have, yeah. I have a good recollection of both of the times I played. First time, I got knocked out by, I believe it was Mike, first round. And then I went back for a little bit of a vengeance, and I played some fun, hard-hitting news Asa that probably has every single card banned right now.
Yeah, that was quite a list. So we're gonna see that, unfortunately. Like, there is players every Fight Night. There's a player who shows up in the first match, they're eliminated. It's obviously a rough feeling. How did you feel after obviously on stream and all that? Is it a big kind of kick?
Oh, it does not feel that great losing first round, because you're like, oh, but I totally could have won if I had another chance to play a favored matchup. And the first game is definitely really pivotal, because a lot of the matchups you're choosing your matchup, you're like, okay, we can handle this next matchup if you lose the previous one.
Yeah.
So like winning that first one, that anchor one, really kind of cements you. And we ended up having to have some pretty rough matchups at the end. When I lost that first one, we had some Sunny versus CTM that wasn't super fortunate.
Can you describe a bit from the SnareBears how y'all as a team prepared for this event? Like, was it a big team-wide thing, or was it more on the 4 players? We're seeing the deck list right now.
It was mostly the 4 players. I mean, we definitely had some people chip in with a lot of deck advice. A lot of people were contemplating, like, oh, what happens if we bring a tag me Zaya or something like that. But it was mostly just the 4 people finding out what decks they're comfortable with, testing the matchups, and we were just trying to figure out what Unband was going to bring.
Do you think y'all called it right?
Yeah. What's that?
We
were pretty sure that Odo was going to bring some sort of smoke.
Yeah,
but,
safe bet.
We did not predict the the big woo. I think everybody pretty much had a read on that one. But I think that I think that both teams really kind of had an idea of what the other were going to bring for the most part. The meta seems not super unpredictable.
Right. Peter, apologies to put you on the spot. I'm not sure if people are rotating or rotating out. Are you staying for another round, or?
I am fortunately staying for another round with the blessing of the Unband team.
Awesome. In terms of the Unband team, how much like research goes on? Like, do you know the 4 players you're playing against? Do you look into it and think like, oh, we're playing against so and so, they're definitely going to bring this, so we should tech against this? How much behind the scenes kind of sleuthing goes on?
Our sleuthing wasn't so much player by player. It was a little bit more general. Like, here's what we know sort of SnareBears are feeling. Here's the sense we have of how they think as a team. So we figured there was going to be a 419. We figured there was going to be R+. We figured there was going to be some big woo. And aside from that, we figured there was going to be, Anarch was going to have the bin breakers. There might be some hippo and maybe some boat. I think corps were a little less certain for us outside of Reality Plus, but seeing some ag infusion there, not that surprising. Seeing some sports metal. We kind of knew the general problems that we would have to handle as a team. And just people picked whatever they thought were going to be able to handle those kind of problems. So it wasn't so much particular, oh, we know that Deer is going to be playing, well, we better be ready for some Woo, even though, ironically, it isn't Deer piloting the Woo list. But we figured that we assumed that SnareBears was going to be on a particular kind of Woo list, for example, having seen, for example, Eric Whiteblade play it on your stream on Thursday.
Yeah.
So we had a sense of kind of what kind of decks SnareBears would be bringing, but weren't doing a lot of scouting or analysis player by player.
So talking about Parhelion, obviously a set that's dropped. It's, I think, just about a month old at this point. There's a couple cards and we see them, and some of them are actually like pretty integral to certain archetypes that we're seeing today. Jonas, as a whole, how do you see Parhelion slotting into the modern meta? And do you feel, I'll just kind of reveal my cards here, but I feel like maybe people, I feel like we're a couple still a bit away before we get the full Parhelion adoption. I do think we're falling back on you know, the safe stuff that is still really good. How do you feel about that? Are we peak Parhelion, or is there still a road to go?
I think that Parhelion's definitely made a huge splash. I think that, you know, one of the big decks to beat that, you know, we've been leaning on is the World Tree Woo. We've only got one copy, but it's an integral part of the Woo decks, and I think that Will could confirm as well that this is probably going to be the deck to beat next week, is this World Tree Woo. But the other big splash, I think, has been the Nana Civic Grid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that both D and Odal had made a pretty good read in that, you know, this Nanny Grid is going to be reasonably powerful. You know, it's not the kind of meta staple that Reality Plus has already been. But I think that you know, we were debating, oh, are we going to hold this back? Or are we going to hold this back for next weekend or not? But we were like, no, we have to play it. You know, it's a good meta deck, and we don't even know if it's the best deck, but it's definitely a fun deck.
Yeah, the hold it back for the next weekend is actually a really important sentence, right? So next weekend is the Circuit Breaker Invitational, another invitational event that Null Signal Games has kind of been ramping up throughout the whole year. You could win at certain events of certain sizes an invitation to the Circuit Breakers. Again, that's next weekend. Go check that out it'll be streamed, I reckon, on Twitch TV/Null Signal Netrunner. Go follow, subscribe, do all that good stuff. But with that being, again, after this, the next big event, how do you think players are holding their cards close to their chest, or are you coming out with what you think the good stuff is now, or is there still secrets hidden in the shadows?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just the Nanny deck that was the real secret one. Yeah, I think that that Brandon Sports Medal was also one that we hadn't seen a lot on Jinteki being tested, but it definitely seems like a dark horse candidate, playing a lot of the ontological support cards and just having a lot of fast advance that you can kind of easily sneak through Clot. You know, if you have 2 core damage or something like that, it's a lot easier to get Clot.
Yeah, it's a cool list, and I would be really surprised to say Thule at these top tables, but I do see some of those core damage cards having a slot, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're gonna be seeing any very out of left field choices like re-education Dupestad grid decks. You know, we've been floating those around a little bit, but you know, who knows? You know, there could be a lot of other stuff that just both testing teams haven't really, you know, put a read on come next week.
For sure. Next week, I'm super excited. But hey, right now we're back on, and welcome to Sports Medal Round 3, facing up against Odal on Smoke, a very enduring Smoke player, as people know Odal to play, and 3 cards on the table from Chris. We're looking at mulligans here. Odal kept, love to see it. Chris kept as well. Dirty laundry into HQ. So Peter, how familiar with the Smoke list in terms of the fast advance tech? I reckon we have a clot behind that self-modifying code, don't we? Ooh, maybe not.
We do not. I want to say that Odal's Smoke list is a little bit more tuned to dealing with R+. You'll see the no free lunch and the pinhole threading in there. So this is maybe not the matchup that Unband would pick as their first string. I do think it's a large strategic disadvantage in this tournament to have picked your runner into your corp and then lost that game. I think, you know, Loosen Bad Axis is there. So not the first pick that Odal would have for what Smoke is going to be up against. Oof.
Oh my. Oh, that's not good. That can't be good. Oh, Imp coming down, finding 2 Rashid on the table, but door number 3 holds the Luminal. And again, the Imp is such a nice card in this matchup. Not only does it allow you to trash agendas, so you're not stealing them, so you don't give Sports Metal pressure, it's one of the few cards in the game that allows you to interact with cards like Biotic Labor and Audacity from HQ or R&D. But Chris gonna get away with that. 3 more cards on the table following those 3 clicks from Luminal.
Absolutely egregious.
Oh, wow. That's rough. Gaslight there in server 6, a new card, Parhelion Special, a very powerful card. Jonas, in terms of Gaslight in Sports Metal, what are you using it for? Is it flexibility or is it just fast advance all the time?
It's flexibility and fast advance, but like, Audacity is your, primo gas card. So you're going to be tutoring that up. If you need to break R&D lock, you can fetch that. You can, get fast break late in the game, to be able to draw through and find whatever it is you need. It's just a powerful, card that you can also use to lend more credibility to your never advanced threats.
And there you go. That's on the table. Tranquility Home Grid. We're going to install draw a card with the Vitruvius. Draw 2 more. Again, hey, it's turn 3. I have 4 points. Odal, only fortunately you have an Imp. Imp is still pretty good. We're going to be running Dirty Laundry to HQ, and sometimes it gets awkward here when you draw cards after emptying your hand with Sports Metal. Oops, 2 agendas can happen, and a Dirty Laundry with the Imp is going to take down that red level clearance. 1 card in the R&D, or sorry, in HQ. Simul chip on the table, and these are open deck lists, so Chris knows there's no clot to fear. Imp is back.
Yes, Simul chip for the Imp though is pretty good here. And I think Odal's really going to be thinking about how to find the accesses that he needs in this matchup. Compared to the last World Tree matchup where Saka had some installable multi-access that he could put down and apply consistent pressure to open servers with, Odal's been relying on Deep Dive and the efficiency of the Stealth Breakers. Now, Ice, I will say, has not been that prevalent in these games, so the efficiency of the Stealth Breakers is not going to be quite as relevant, and it's going to be about landing the Mad Dash at an opportune time if Odal thinks that he can, or just basically slamming that Deep Dive as soon as possible, maybe using DJ Fenris to get an extra click by turning into Sable with that. But it's really going to be a battle of accesses here for the Stealth player.
Then we got Steve on HQ. Mind you, that Imp was just purged out. It had 2 counters on it. I believe Odal didn't want to trash that Tranquility in HQ. The 1 card in HQ we know. But Steve Cambridge is going to allow you to play a little mini game. First time you run HQ, show 2 cards. Corp chooses 1 to remove from game, you get the other. When you show 2 Dirty Laundries, not really a game we're playing, and you see that Tranquility there in HQ. Jonas, what's in server 5 here on the table? Is it just a Bass chilling?
It could be another Calvin that just, chills there for a while. You don't really use it a whole lot, but it's good to have when you need to draw cards. Could be a Mavirus, could be a whole lot of things.
We see a food there up the top, that Dirty Laundry that's been returned. Oh, wow. And we got some good HQ pressure, but Tranquility just to gain credits here. It looks like Chris doesn't need the card draw. Maybe has a bit of fast advance in hand. Oh, that looks like it's another Audacity. Scoring out the first Mega Pre is only a 1-pointer, but that still puts Chris on game point. 2 cards in hand, 2 credits. Looking at the bin, same sort of board state. About turn 4, turn 5, and 2 Audacities are out. So now we know what the fast advance threats are a bit more limited. It's just the Basture Bogas, the Biotics, which are a bit more expensive. And speaking of Biotics, there's a Biotic Labor in HQ. We're going to play that Dirty Laundry again and again. Going back to hand again. Analyze Chris doesn't want that Simul chip to be returned. Again, that does allow you to refresh that Imp, so it's just going to be some money on the table to get the card draw hitting the top of R&D. So the Mavirus is... Sorry?
I was just saying you just got to keep preventing him from drawing agendas off the top of R&D over and over again. Odal's making the right move here.
The Mavirus is really quite interesting, right? Like, you don't have Clot. It still deals with the Imp, and I reckon you have multiple Simul chips to bring that back, but we're bringing that Tranquility Home Grid down. It's all advance, Ella Vagao bifurcation, a 6 agenda points. Chris now with 2 credits can score out with an Ella Vagao. Going to get 2 credits off that, not the card draw here. I think we know 1 Tranquility in hand. Just a no free lunch. There's probably just a click for 3 credits, an easy mark. You can offshore. We're going HQ. We're going to be able to get now some options off Steve Cambridge. We're going to play a Dirty Laundry again and again.
Well, I think that Chris is probably going to give back the no free lunch at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
It's a Biotic in HQ. So I think we know it's Biotic Tranquility in hand. Seeing the top of R&D again. Odal needs a lot of accesses, but it's so hard to deal with Sports Metal. That's a Mega Pre, though. A 3-1. Chris is going to get 2 unknown cards into HQ.
Yeah, and at 6 points with no clot, this is a very, very scary board state for the runner here. Single Elvigal Bifurcation is just going to win it for Sports Medal. They can score that one straight from hand. No Audacity or Biotic necessary.
Now, if it is a Basel on the table, you're going to need 3 credits plus 3 more to advance. So that's a 6 credit play. Anytime you have a red level clearance in hand and you start with at least 1 credit, you can consider that like a subliminal messaging, just a clickless credit. So it does lower the threshold just a bit. But Chris drawing up, again, these are unknown cards. Does Odal have any way to see multiple cards outside of Deep Dive, or is it just singles in your area?
I believe it is just the area singles and the Deep Dive. And Deep Dive is only going to get potentially 1 agenda here now that DJ has fetched Steve instead of Sable. So Odal's really just going to have to spend a lot of clicks taking singles in R&D and probably not HQ at this point, which is not really the space you want to be in. It's going to be a battle of efficiency for just your clicks. And I'm sure Chris is going to keep putting out these remotes, making Odal think about where exactly he's going to run, because there's always a chance that you just leave a Rashida on the board, completely give up your lock on R&D, and that is very not good.
So 2 servers on the table.
One of these going to be Tranquility here, and then maybe some sort of way to draw, through this poking R&D.
And there's that poke on R&D again, trying to always to the top of the deck. A lot of times in these sports medal matchups, if you're getting your central runs, you want to do them earlier in the turn. A lot of times you're forced into awkward situations, but if you run last click and steal an agenda, then the corp knows they can draw with impunity, not with an open HQ that you could kind of take the spoils that they've drawn into. So Odal starting there in click 1, drawing up. Dirty Laundry going to get a card draw on the Anacom once it resolves. We're just hitting HQ here, and I do think, well, there's a Meridian, that there has to be on the table one of the Tranquilities we've seen. So we'll see if Chris can leverage that. We're checking server 9. Chris wants to react here. Did Steve fire? No, they only had 1 card.
There was only 1 card in the
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so the Dirty Laundry does not enter the heap until it's resolved, which means after the run ends. So there was actually no Steve trigger there, albeit while it looks like there's 2 cards in the heap. That's a best to your Boga. That's 4 to trash. And again, you're going to need a fair few more credits to score out an agenda, so Odal's going to leave that. That's important to know. Maryland on the table, not credit positive this turn, but one of the few asset economy cards in this deck, barring Rashida.
Yeah, I'm sure Odal would have loved to have seen that Maryland instead of the Bass. And Chris icing up the Maryland just wants to really secure the drip income from that. Probably feels pretty safe on R&D here, given the ability of sports to draw through.
If that Maryland sticks, Chris will have enough money to score out from hand, right? With just wild Mad Dash R&D. We're going in. That's some exclamation marks. If this hits an agenda, you get an additional point. If it whiffs, you just take a meat damage. The meat damage is not very relevant. Sometimes you'll just take your outs here. Or you take your shots, you find it. Whoa. Mega Pre, the final
absolutely
one.
The right call here, too.
Yeah, I mean, if Odal's got to make those singles work, then this is a way to make the single work for you.
So now what? We're on 5 points. On game point, if you can find any of the Vitruvius left, I think, or the Global Food Initiative. Is there only 1 food in the list, or is there 2?
Just 1.
But,
one. If Odal's got a deep dive here or something like that,
yeah.
If Chris got a little bit cheeky and it's got something in archives, there's many ways to win here for Odal here.
So we'll see if it's a deep dive. It's kind of hard to deep dive with the Mad Dash in hand. If you miss, you take the meat damage. 2 things go down at once, but there's a chance it's setting up for that. A fantastic play. 5 agenda points. Again, in terms of the raw 3-2s, we're looking at 2 more Vitruviuses, if I'm not mistaken. And centrals are wide open. Chris only went for credits here. I hate
it. Oh, that's some good Netrunner right there.
Yeah. Yeah, you take those shots sometimes. You need to when you feel like you might be that far behind, and you'll take those 2 points for sure. Now, Odal has 3 clicks here. Deep dive is something you have to commit your whole turn largely to. So as soon as Odal draws or checks a remote server for any reason, that's kind of off the table. Hunting of Vitruvius is exactly where we were. That's where last game was. So much of this is hunt for Vitruvius. Running R&D. Deep dive won't be seen this turn, I don't think. Top of the deck. No steal, no trash. Do you think when Chris didn't draw off that he has an agenda in hand?
Could easily be, yeah.
We're going to find out. We have a Steve trigger here. Dirty Laundry SMC. With open deck lists, the SMC might not be that threatening. You know it's not going to pull a clot.
Interesting that Steve is a May. You might not even want to remove that.
That's true.
If the game goes later.
That's Biotic Labor there in HQ.
Unlikely.
That is one card Odo knew, and at 8 credits next turn with the Maryland campaign, that Biotic Labor is an out. So even if you trash the Bast Chiriboga in server 9, Chris can still probably score out here. The question is whether you need a fast break. Fast break is alive and well on this board state.
And now the fast break does count the mad dash in the area, right?
It should, yeah.
Okay.
Wow, so many dirty laundries this game. That was return to hand. We're going back into HQ. Again, this could be at some Meridian from HQ. So the ice on server 8, we don't know what that is. Anakam drawing a card. Chris here, 8 credits. If they have the agenda, they can definitely score it out. They didn't draw on the last couple steals. Icing up R&D does not have it.
Oh, wow.
Well, this ice definitely explains, double ice. This definitely explains getting rid of that SMC. You would think that with no plot in the deck, Chris wouldn't be so scared of the SMC and would just get rid of the dirty laundry, slow it down a little bit. But I guess at this point, Chris is thinking, I'm less worried about Odol's credit count, given that the runner is already floating enough to trash the Bast, and instead wants to fight for these R&D accesses. And with Odol saying something like, oh, if it's not an HQ, then I'm fine, that really represents maybe a deep dive in hand that would have, with only 19 cards left in R&D, a pretty high chance of hitting, one of those Vitruvius that are in the deck. So Chris playing a bit more of a defensive action there. Going to shore up and force Odol to actually install some breakers here. Is this the first icebreaker we have seen installed aside from that Mayfly that was just sold?
Yeah, I think so. If we don't count the boat, maybe we see for a second. This is a Penrose. It's a stealth breaker, and we haven't been talking about stealth at all. This is Smoke. Now you're going to need 1 stealth credit, which is exactly what Smoke provides. Checking Meridian there in the chat log, it is 4 strengths, which means if you connect into the Meridian on R&D, you can't break it. You don't have enough stealth credits on this run. So it's kind of up to you to figure out what to do here. You can bounce off the Magnet, which they're going to be on 7 credits anyways, which means they're going to draw into an unknown card and threaten fast advance, or you can go in here and eat the Meridian. If you eat the Meridian, you're further behind on points. You're going to need to steal 2 agendas. So this is kind of a tough choice. I'm not actually sure which way you'd go here. It looks like we're just going to end the run.
Yeah, I think Odol's got to be very scared of hitting a Drafter next, because Drafter probably installs Rashida and gets red level back to hand or gets Audacity back to hand. And that just draws an enormous amount of cards and probably wins Chris the game if Odol has to hit that face check.
This is interesting. If this server is Magnet into Meridian, which we saw, do you want the Meridian on the outside or the inside? Because it is the face check here. It's just kind of interesting the way that it works with Smoke and forcing, stealth credits so that the Meridian is more likely to fire. We have an upgrade.
Yeah, big question. I think Odol probably just eats the Meridian here. Has no doubt looked at the deck list, knows that it's the only barrier, and does not want to spend time installing Cleaver here. So that Meridian is just going to be -1 point as soon as it shows up, would be my expectation.
So while this could be Mavirus, it's only a 1 of in the list, if I'm not mistaken, the Giordano Memorial Grid, which is going to be an 8 credit successful run, or 8 credit access once you get through all this ice.
Colloquially known as the pizza field, it definitely would be seeming like Chris is telegraphing that on R&D here, just waiting to protect that R&D and, hope to find some sort of an agenda in the next turn or two.
Chris might not have the agenda here. Again, protecting R&D, waiting to draw into it. There's going to get a shuffle here with the Maryland campaign, so even if you see the top of R&D, Chris likely is going to draw into a different card. It's very hard to deal with R&D. Does Odol have any pinhole threadings in this list? It's one of the easiest ways to deal with the pizza grid.
Yes, there are 2 pinhole threadings in this list, and with only 40 cards in Smoke and half the deck seen at this point, you got decent odds of 1 at least being in this large grip that Odol has right now.
Odol hoping just to survive 1 more turn. We're on turn 10. Kind of feels a bit long for Sports Metal, let's be honest, but Maryland campaign going to get shuffled back. Now, you don't always want to shuffle it. It looks like Chris isn't shuffling it, meaning that there's cards in there that he wants to draw that aren't Maryland campaign. That's very believable on this board state, considering that could be the winning agenda. Spin Doctor just to draw 2 more. HQ wide open.
You can spend your first draw here.
You could Biotic Bass, right? And still score out?
Absolutely.
Yep. but shuffling with spin. Shuffling audacity. Red level.
I love when you see in real time what they're clicking on. There you go. Red level, double red level. So not the audacity, which kind of makes sense. We know Chris has the biotic in hand. We know the bass on the table. So just having a bit of that R&D lock break and some credits. Is that a second upgrade on R&D? This looks strange to me.
Oh, this is a very cool play. So the idea here is he knows that Odol has a pinhole threading, and Odol's next turn looks like it's going to be pinhole the Giordano, run R&D, run archive, set up for the deep dive, and find that last Vitruvius. But if it's two upgrades on R&D, it's hard to tell which is which. Maybe the first was a Mavericks and was just a fake. So Odol's actually going to have to make a 50-50 here, maybe a weighted 50-50 on which pinhole he hits if he wants to snipe the Giordano in order to set up for the deep dive.
We're starting with a sure gamble, though, so deep dive might not be on this table this turn. But yeah, totally right. I think that's two upgrades on R&D. On my JNet, it doesn't look like that's the case, but I think that's the case.
There is a small visual bug on JNet right now having to do with upgrades in the root R&D, but there are definitely two upgrades.
Odol thinking this through. 15 credits again. This is not an endurance list. If we want to get through ice, we need to produce breakers. We have the Penrose. It breaks fractors, or it breaks barriers, excuse me, the turn it's installed. Now, again, if it's only the Meridian, you might not need to produce a fractor. In terms of a killer, we're looking again at After Image, the classic for the smoke decks, for the stealth lists. Chris clarifying that R&D has two upgrades, although you can only see one. And there's not a lot of upgrades in this list, right? Like, it doesn't have a Chrysium, does it?
Nope. The three upgrades, I believe, are the Mavericks, the let me see here, Mavericks, Tranquility, and Giordano. And Tranquility is remote server only, so the only two upgrades that this can be are going to be Mavericks and Giordano. Now, one of the tricks here for Odol is if he does want to fight R&D, this is a drafter at the innermost, he is going to need a second stealth credit in order to be making this run. Because his ID is only going to give him one, and drafter is going to require one for the After Image.
I think he might be calling that this is a Meridian, which is the one seen card, but you're right. If there's a drafter here, there's a bit of a blowout. We just can't break it unless SMC can produce something to break it, but it can't without stealth credits. You're right.
Definitely. He does have the one click left over, which he did not have last time, which means if this is a drafter that installs a Rashida or something else, he can at least go fetch it.
So this is interesting too, right? If there's a Giordano on the remote server, it doesn't prevent a successful run, right?
Correct.
It shouldn't matter for this situation, but if you can suss out what it is and you can't afford to trash a Giordano, and I think with 18 credits, Odol is really preparing to trash it. It's going to be more money too once you take this Meridian into your score area, which you can do now, or you can go produce a Fractor, which is expensive. Looks like we have the paperclip credits off of the overclock. We're going to break this for only, 3 credits still. But that does save you a bit on the Giordano down the line. We're looking for Vitruvius again, a single axis. There's a Giordano. That's going to be 8 additional credits, 3 more to trash. So your money's going to go pretty quickly. You're going to pay 8. The other upgrade here has to be Mavirus. I don't know if we're going to see it. Unseen card on top of R&D. Is this the Vitruvius? Nothing.
Mavericks. Yep, nothing. And Odol's decision there to find the paperclip to break the Meridian rather than taking the -1 and just saying I don't want to spend this money really says that he wants to hunt out this one of these last two Vitruvius. Chris quipping a little bit. Because taking that -1 would put Odol down to 4 points, and which means it would need to be a Vitruvius plus another agenda, and that really changes the access math. So I think this is a key strategic decision here to say that I don't want to have to fish out a second agenda if I see one of the Vitruvius. I'm really just going to, put my mark on finding one of these 2 pointers.
Yeah, it's an unenviable position to be in, but that's such a hard situation to find the 2 Vitruvius is finding one of them before Chris can even just produce an Elevagao, right? There's so many outs that Chris has on this board state. Top of R&D is unknown. We do get a Spin Doctor draw a turn before Chris just clicking for credits.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, no fast breaks, no RLCs.
There are so many outs on this board, and click for credit is definitely not it.
I mean, maybe you get a drafter or something like that on R&D, and that way you have to find yet another breaker. But yeah, it's looks like Odol still got some outs here.
There's that third ice. Again, Drafter is the one that forces a breaker. The Drafter has some very relevant subroutines. It is a sentry. And After Image is the killer du jour in Smoke, and that requires at least 2 stealth credits, or sorry, only 1 stealth credit, I think, if you don't bypass, if you just break it.
Yeah. The awkward thing here is any other piece of ice, because I believe there's just the one Meridian list, is going to demand a 2nd stealth credit out of Odal. And that's a bit of a problem because that means installing another card, whether that's a Netmarker or a Taka or something like that. So whatever this piece of ice is, it's definitely demanding another install, at least for this first run. Now, potentially could eat the Gatekeeper Fire and then have it open for the next turn. But that's a big risk. Giving Sports 3 cards here would not feel.
So we had HQ, found that Biotic Labor we know about, returning a Sure Gamble, playing it to gain 4 credits and a card with Anakam. Very good value there. Odal on 1 click left, 9 credits. Again, HQ, I think we know the Biotic Labor. We know the card that was drawn last turn that didn't go anywhere. And the self-modifying code on the table is not actually threatening a Claude. Again, these are open deck lists. So if Chris has it, Chris is clicking for credits. What's happening?
Now, presumably server 8 is going to be that last Tranquility Grid that we saw a while ago. But yeah, he's just keeps clicking for credits here. I don't know how many stealth credits it'll take to get past Drafter and everything else, but he would need, I guess, 2 to get it with After Image, or 1.
I think it's 1 because you don't have to bypass, right? You can just boost.
Yes.
And then it's another one for Magnet, and yeah, so you need at least two credits to get past Drafter Magnet combo here, and so he's clicking up for credits here so that he can threaten to get back Giordano on R&D to protect from singling R&D again, presumably.
So we're going to HQ. There's 1 unknown card here. It's really funny, right? Like, it's a Betrayal!
Oh wow! What?
So that means it was server 8 or server 5, almost certainly not a Tranquility. Otherwise, you can score from, what would that be, 5 credits with the Tranquility plus Bath. So wow, GG, Odal, just extremely sharp play there. Called that he would need the extra point from the Meridian, didn't need that. Made the blind mad dash, which is, sometimes you need to get lucky, and Odal recognized that, which is very sharp, and then did. That's the other key part of knowing that you need to get lucky, is actually getting a little bit lucky. So very good use of his resources there in a matchup that obviously not quite as tech for. Just a really lovely play. Very pleased with my teammate.
Whoa, what happened there? He must have drawn down to last turn with 5 credits and wasn't able to score it out. Just short, like, a credit, right?
Yep, absolutely.
1 credit short. So if you have a red level clearance, you're good there. But yeah, started the turn on 5 credits and probably top decked the Vitruvius right there. For looking at Bass, that's 3 credits to res, 3 to score. All the Audacities were out, didn't shuffle those back in, but the red level clearances were there, and they were a clickless credit if you got them. That seemed like a really unfortunate draw, but Odal playing it right, taking those lines, the mad dash and getting those accesses when he can. I was about to say, right? Like, you're expecting Smoke to be really good. Stealth Breakers are really good at dealing with ice, but you saw in that matchup, it was actually kind of annoying. Like, Odal had to do so much work just to be able to threaten like basic ice, right? Oh, I can't deal with this until I also get this piece and get this piece. It seemed like a liability in this sort of matchup, but obviously getting the accesses, and that's going to be it. Chris is taking his first loss there. And of course, we're going to have more than 4 rounds today. That is the first loss for the SnareBears. Unband has only 2 links left here. Odal, who's now going to be running the top table, and Brandon, the king, waiting right after that, while there's 3 SnareBears now cracking their knuckles in the wings, ready to return to a stream.
Yeah, we could have a lot of sports left in our future if Brandon does well on Corp side.
Yeah, I'm actually really stoked too, because Odal on the Corp side is playing Ag Infusion, and we talked about how the Nanocivic Grid Ag Infusion decks are quite powerful, and it's something that people have been kind of keeping secret. I haven't been seeing these in the JNet lobbies, and I reckon they're quite good.
Yes, Nanocivic Grid is really good in Ag Infusion. It is not the version we took to this tournament, but we have seen some turn 6 wins from Ag Infusion, turn 6 or 7 wins from Ag Infusion featuring Nanocivic Grid. So the deck has a lot of power in it. And Odal has played a lot of Ag Infusion before, is mostly known as a Smoke player, but credit where credit's due, has also done a lot of work to play Ag Infusion, not just in this format, but in several previous ones as well. So definitely knows his way around the FD.
So on like a macro level, Jonas, when it comes to like Chris now being off Sports Metal, leaving just the Ag Infusion, the Op, and the Reality Plus, I don't know if you know, is Sports Metal the deck to lead with? Is it the thing that will like, kind of win quickly some sort of matchups to like kind of close doors on Unband? But how do you think SnareBears are feeling now losing the Sports Metal?
I don't think that we're particularly worried about losing the Sports Metal. I think that we put out the Sports Metal because while it's a good deck, it's also a deck that is not a matchup dependent deck. So it can get lucky and win against the best players on decks that are teched against it, like Will's World Tree Woo. It can also, not get as lucky and lose against decks that are just getting accesses, like in the game with Odal on Smoke. And so, we put that out there just because we wanted to make sure that we had, tech choices for later and, so that we had good matchups that we could choose, should we lose that first game.
So going into this round, I'm not 100% sure on the structure. Is Odal allowed to choose which side of the matchup to play? Because now SnareBears picks who they send into Odal. Is that correct?
So the loser always picks the next side that they want to do. So they will either choose to run against the Ag Infusion of Odal, or they'll corp against Odal's Smoke.
So in this SnareBears pit, how do you think that conversation is going? Would you rather play against that Smoke deck, or would you rather play against that Ag Infusion?
I mean, it really depends upon what's exactly is in that Smoke deck, and I'm looking at it now. The Smoke deck has misdirection, so it could be a rough matchup for the Reality Plus. It seems very heavily teched with no free lunches and pinhole threading, so you probably don't want to put in the Reality Plus 419 here. My guess is that you put in D's on a Reg Hoshiko Shiro endurance boat rig. I think that might match up reasonably well against Nanocivic Grid Ag Infusion. 419, I think again, leading with Cable Carnage 419 kind of leaves us open a little bit more. But World Tree Woo, I haven't done a whole lot of testing World Tree Woo versus Nanocivic Grid, but that also might be a good matchup as well. There's a lot of strength pumping things like Takobi and K2CP Turbine that should be able to deal with ice on the board reasonably well. And there's some big breakers as well, like Buzzsaw and Cleaver, that are very efficient, so that if World Tree Woo is able to get that big rig set up, it might be very possible that the Woo might be able to get through the grids and the prison of Ag.
Yeah, so
we'll see what goes on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited about that, because that is one of the supposed liabilities of the World Tree list, is that it needs to be able to run consistently to power up its rig. Now, with something like Ag Infusion, one of the big play patterns that Ag Infusion wants to do, for those who are unfamiliar with the ability, it allows you to trash a derezzed ice to force the runner into another server that they start encountering ice on that server. So if you can go ahead and get something really massive like a tier or a DNA tracker rezzed on one server early enough in the game, and then just put unrezzed ice that you have no interest in rezzing on every single other server, it can be hard to spin the World Tree up. So I'm actually really interested to see how quickly or in what way that matchup slides, because I think it can be difficult for that deck to break a tier very soon in the game, let alone some of the other stuff is kind of difficult. For a Fractor, we're on Echelon, right? So I don't know, even a Size and Ton can be annoying very soon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I definitely think that the World Tree versus Ag Infusion matchup would be the most complicated of any that we could possibly see.
Yeah.
So if we want a match that might go to time, as players take 5 to 10 minutes thinking over their options, that would be the one to pick. There are a lot of just complicated little tricks that both Ag Infusion and Woo can pull out. And I would really love to see that matchup, honestly. It's probably be the most exciting for me.
I believe we have, I'm just checking the Discord right now, but it looks like we're going to have Janktivist, who's going to be running, corping into Odal running, if I'm not mistaken. Again, we'll be corrected in a second if that's the case. But it looks like we're going to be seeing Op versus Odal on Smoke. And this op list is 54 cards. This is actually a very close to the deck list of the week, as of maybe not right now, but at least as of last week, which is this sort of hard-hitting news, Gaslight, end of the line list. And there's been some changes. Again, we're on 54 cards, so we're playing another ASIF protocol, and then we can play 4 additional cards to respect that sort of distribution. It looks like we're on 3 end of the line. I'm a big fan of that inclusion. I feel like this deck can set up so many wild scenarios where you can just kind of die out of nowhere. The big thing here in op, if your urban renewal finishes a 1-coster gets trashed, you can go find a 0-coster, which allows you to pull the Drago, and then you can do advance, end the line. And that's so important. It's really hard to play around that. Cards like No Free Lunch help you if you can get some burst draw. You can't actually survive it with just a single Stone Ship chart room, so you're going to need a bit more work there. But otherwise, in terms of the inclusions into the list, it's kind of hard to tell which 4 cards were added. I think we have a bit more ice and Overseer matrices.
Hello. I'm just tuning in.
Hey, Jinsei, how's it going?
What a bunch of games. Hi, and I'm looking at the op list, and I think one notable include is the Overseer Matrix, unless you just mentioned that, as a very hot piece of APOC tech, because it makes the runner end up being tagged when they try to go and trash the whole board. So it was initially brought in by NWE in their Gagarin list, I think a year ago or so. And we've since seen some people play around with it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting card, the way that interaction works, let alone protecting it on a remote server. And then on top of that, you have the ability to, I think this list, is it running extract? You can even extract it down to go get a 0-coster to instant speed, or not exactly instant speed, you spend a click, but it looks like we're off. Real quick, for those who are joining, Jinsei is from Unband, who's going to be joining us from comms. I'm not sure, Peter, if you're heading out or if you're going to stay with us as well.
Sadly, I have to head out. It's been a delight being here. Best of luck to both competitors. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, cheers. An absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us as well. And good luck for your team for the rest of the event. But
Thank you.
This is round 4, if I'm not mistaken. We got Smoke coming down with the Onacom Dirty Laundry into HQ. This list, while we see an end of line in the HQ, is running hard-hitting news, and different to the Bridgman op list we saw for the last competitive season or so, this list is only on 2 hard-hitting news. Now, in 54 cards, the chance of you opening with that early is not as likely, but now with Gaslight being a very easy to res, a very cheap influence card, that can produce hard-hitting news on more board states. So Sure Gamble and Odal keeping on 4 cards in hand is going to be very important, because we got double Gaslight on the table. Our Helian special. Now, if you're on only 3 cards in hand, you can't hard-hitting news into end of the line. Hard-hitting news is a terminal, but we're going to get economic warfare into hard-hitting news, and Smoke doesn't have a link here. It's going to be expensive, but I think we can do that. Janktivist is going to need some burst economy here, but double economic. Whoa.
Down to 1 credit in hand, or 1 credit left. That's
yeah, that is rough.
That is so rough. Again, seeing double Gaslight, I don't know. In my matchups I've been playing, it just sometimes you don't get your Gaslights, you don't get your tech cards, or sorry, your punishment cards. Now, and speaking of tech cards, Odal has access to 1 misdirection. They have to find it from their deck, they have to install it, and they still need to get 4 credits. Now, this list is only on a single boom. Janktivist can't threaten out boom next turn. They just don't have enough clicks and credits. Odal, this is fine. But as long as Odal keeps more than 3 cards in hand, they cannot die to a single end of the line. So it's more about what do you want to do for the next 2 or 3 turns, more than it is, are you going to die on the next turn? Because I think Odal will survive at least 1 more turn.
absolutely, yes. I mean, they have 4 tags, but Janktivist is also dirt poor right now. It kind of set both players back a lot here.
Yeah.
And, presumably Odal also has other outs. They've got things like Imp to be able to hunt for, operations that they may need to go after.
As long as Odal respects the cards in hand, and they did type end of line in the chat, Anacom's also going to help a bit. It's not going to really help you dodge lethal damage on the corpse turn, but it does allow you to get through your deck, of course. So 4 cards in hand is where you at least want to end here. Again, it's only boom. It's only end of line, so Odal's drawing up, and if you can get the misdirection down, you're going to be in an okay spot, because again, Janktivist doesn't have a lot of money. No free lunch. Do you leave that on the table? I don't think Janktivist can afford to trash this thing.
Absolutely not, and I think it might even be bait right here. Because Janktivist is so poor, he's just kind of taunting him.
Now this deck,
well, he may be poor, but 1 extract is all he needs to go like surge in credits instantly, right?
Yeah, it's a big jump.
Absolutely.
3 credits or 6 if you're trashing something. And a lot of the credits from this deck are from installed cards. So some of it's stranger stuff, like you do have the wall-to-walls, you have the launch campaigns, a Maryland campaign. That stuff takes a bit. Not all of them are credit positive, and Odal has a misdirection just from hand.
Oh, I was gonna say that could be the saving grace.
Nice.
That's definitely gonna help.
Yeah, that's huge. Now Odal can spend half their turn to clear 4 credits, or for 4 tags for only 4 credits, and again, 2 clicks it's an immense amount of saving, and we're basically we've reset. Welcome back to turn 1. Janktivist having a couple fewer credits, 1 card on the table, but Odal is in a good spot now, able to shrug off the future hardening news, and I do think Janktivist is not running any copies of Best Defense.
It's interesting to me that server 3 was not contested here as well. Perhaps that's correct. But I imagined that would be a money card. And didn't turn out to be.
I mean, it could be an excavator right here. He's got 1 excavator. He's got, it's not going to be a campaign, obviously. It could be a drudge work as well, or an overseer matrix. But clearly, Janktivist is just looking to money up here, put the offshore on HQ, and start rebuilding after that early turn reset.
There's a Svidagor, a very, very powerful card. It's something that you definitely need to trash in almost all matchups. It's really hard to spend 4 on this board state. So we'll see if that does connect. Again, that gives you 3 credits and an op ability, which is a lot of value, and Janktivist definitely needs some money. Drawing up here, we saw 3 sports medal games in a row, and they're all very fast games, and I think we're about to, sit down. I hope you packed yourself a sandwich, because this might be a longer game. This op list, it's a bit different than the Bridgman list that's running as many 2-pointers as they largely can. This op list is actually kind of bad at scoring out agendas. It has a lot of big agendas. It doesn't have defensive upgrades, and generally you threaten with the credit differential, things with hard-hitting news, but this deck can't score out that well. If Odal can stick a misdirection and just a single copy of No Free Lunch, there's actually not that much it can do, as long as you can not get hit by 2 urban renewals in the same turn.
I think you're right. That was part of the shakeup that the Bridgman list was. They just had this multi-pronged winning plan, essentially, where you're going for scores, but the scores accelerate the threat of the kill. And in this instance, instead, we have this digging up the Drago and then just dealing with the runner immediately. So it's all in on this particular plan. But unfortunately, I don't think Smoke has any great answers to not get got once that really comes into play, apart from the no free lunches, one of which has been trashed already.
I will say that a lot of the things that Smoke does have, I believe that they have some pinhole threadings as well, and we may see those later in the game to kind of diffuse the remotes when they start getting a little bit more heavy to get into. When they've got things like Overseer Matrix, it can kind of slow down the rate that the runner takes tags, trying to clear out that remote.
Even the imps can be really impactful, right? It's your only acid tech, let alone allows you to do with some of the cards from hand. We're looking at only a single Audacity to get the 2 Aziefs. Aziefs, mind you, shuffled back into the deck. Extract to get rid of the 2-coster. This is the first time we are firing up here for the Overseer Matrix. Love this server here. So just to explain for those who are watching what op does, it's a lot of text on this one, but it says once per turn, whenever you trash a res card, you can go search your deck for a card that costs exactly 1 less. Install, res it, get all that stuff for free, not paying credit costs, but you can only use this once per turn. So you see cards like Extract that say you can trash one of your installed cards to get extra money. That might sound like a bad thing, but the fact that now you traded your drudge work, which might not have a lot of work to do in the next couple turns, to immediately get it a 1-coster from your deck, we're basically world tree the corp to some extent, and you see how that thing can be quite good.
That's a really interesting analogy. I never thought of Ob as the world tree of corpse.
It's good fun too.
It certainly is.
Yeah. Oh, Ob is an absolute favorite of mine. Diesel drawing up after drawing twice. Odal on only 2 credits here. The economy is not spinning up. Throwing out a DJ Fenris, a unique card in this list. What is the big economy for Smoke decks, right? Are we trying to run and get credits with Netrunner, build your own Desperado, or is it just the piece in our time and just playing events on tempo with Anakam?
Somewhat. The elegance of Smoke and the way Odo is mastered, he has this whole stealth punk mindset where it's about breaking ice as cheaply as possible. So when Endless Eula was out, it was also the obvious include of, no, we don't want Paperclip, because that's not in the mindset. We need the the breaking it for 3 credits instead.
Odal's.
But
sorry, well, I know Odal's mass drawing here, because if he doesn't deal with this urban renewal this turn, he is dead. This will fire for 4 meat damage, and at that point you can bring out a Drago. If you can't, if the Drago still stays in R&D,
yes.
you have the end of line in hand.
So my read is that there's probably a no free lunch in hand. Well,
yeah, that's definitely what he's got to be digging for.
I don't think he has it.
Oh, huh.
We're mad dashing to try and close the game out. Again, it's SDS drone deployments here and other 5-3 agendas, so you could win on 2 axes if you're really fortunate. It looks like that's an SDS, the one agenda with an additional cost, if I'm not mistaken. But if this fires, that's game. There's the SDS. We're trashing the mantle. I think Odal might just be trying to get some accesses here. You can run R&D. You can trash anything if you can find another agenda. But if that goes off, the urban renewal, the Anakom won't save you. That's going to be... I don't think he has it. It's top of R&D or nothing.
Yes, and it's already too late to contest the urban as well here, because he would take the tag from the Matrix.
We had a pinhole.
So interesting. You could pinhole the renewal and stay alive.
Yeah, you'd float a tag, so if they have double, you're in a bad spot if they have double end the line.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But that should be it. Ob, going to use their ability. Urban, doing the damage, pulling in the Drago, advance, going to get the end of the line. That's going to be the combo. That's 7 damage. Sorry, 8 damage. Turn 8. Janktivist finding the line.
What a combo.
Yeah, it's like really surprising. It's one of the like big Parhelion things that think well, it's not like anything part of this was actually no, end the line is new. Excuse me. It is something that definitely needs to be played around. I think Odal saw that coming. It seemed like on the last couple turns they were just really drunk. Again, if they just have a single no free lunch, this does not get them. That's quite tricky.
Wow, and we thought that was going to be a long grindy game right there. But that one is definitely going to be a lot quicker than we still have a lot of Ag Infusion. Well, we may have some Ag Infusion left to go.
Yeah, we can hope. We can hope for sure. I want to see the list. So looking at the standings right now, out of Unband, there's only 1 player who hasn't taken a loss yet. That is the King, Brandon. I'm not sure. We'll find out soon who is going to be oracling for Brandon, but on the SnareBears side, Janktivist will still be up. We saw that op, and I'm a big fan of that op list. 54 cards is not going to hit your consistency when you double Gaslight turn 1, let's say that. But otherwise, we could be looking at a route 66 cards for Cabanessa. So I think we're going to have a fun matchup. Just say, can you talk a bit about what Brandon brought to this event?
Yes, so I've been oracling for Brandon a bunch, and it's always a marvel to see him like navigate the sports medal. So it's just he keeps finding lines that I would never think of. So in our instance, we were building some very interesting sports lists in this case. So we're essentially using the hypoxia to apply some core damage and then use that to score an ontological more quickly. But it's a lot of like negative points that the runner is faced with. And then I suppose also the economic abundance of stock buyback that you might have seen in our PE deck as well, that Bridgman brought to Worlds and came forth with, where once you have given the runner a bunch of fake points or 0-pointers, as in the Kusanagi, this can really make it so that you never have money problems anymore. Yeah, and then on the runner side, we have a very comfy APOC Fushiko list that, quite standard.
So APOC, incredibly impactful event. If you're not familiar, it says you can only play it after you've made a successful run in 1 turn on all 3 central servers. Once you've done that, spend a click to trash the entirety of the corpse board, but then flip all your cards face down. Now, this is a card that could easily be considered in a tournament Swiss cheese. I think that technically is true, but APOC decks have been very enduring and have a big place in certain metas. But playing an open deck list into an APOC list, Jonas, what do you do against it? A lot of these corp decks, none of them are actually running Chrysium Grid, while some of them have their own defensive upgrades. Is your plan just to go fast, or can you take, I guess you have to take some amount of time to respect that threat?
Yeah, so I think the big threat, or the big predator of Apocalypse decks here, is going to be Ag Infusion. Ag Infusion makes it very hard to successfully land an Apocalypse when you have other defensive upgrades. You have your redirect ability that kind of slows you down for at least 1 click. So you'll have to find some other way to get an extra click to be able to land that Apocalypse. And on the other hand, versus Apocalypse decks, you can just go over them by doing things like fast advancing. So if you spend your entire turn apocalypsing a board, that means that you lose your board and you can't, for example, have a clot threat up.
Yeah.
If you're playing an Apocalypse Shaper deck.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So Janktivist will be up here if we do see Apocalypse against that op list. Again, I'm not sure exactly the math on it. I think you're going to need to have multiple copies of Steelskin Scarring in hand to survive the 8 damage, because I believe every Steelskin is +2, so you get from 5 to 7. I'm doing the math really quickly. That actually might be incorrect. I think it might be 5 to 6. So if you want to survive that, you're going to need some tech. If we're looking at the APOC list, it is still running 3 no free lunge. So that is your kind of your window out here, and 3 pinhole threading. It is definitely prepared for that matchup. Apocalypse generally pretty good against these wide decks, these op lists, but the op is a bit more aggressive. And I just say, as you said, having access to those Overseer Matrix is a card that's kind of tricky to deal with when you want to wipe the board. It's a card that you actually don't have to res until the last minute.
I wasn't even thinking about those just now. Good shout. Because I was thinking about the urban renewals and how, like, usually with Apocalypse, like, the logic is you're sitting there, you're letting your fermenter strip, you're going up to 40, 50 credits, and then you're untouchable by any kind of run punishment like HHNs or whatever. But because there's the urban renewals as well, and they're proactively threatening your Apocalypse in hand, you are actually forced to run before you're comfortable. And so I think, like, even without the Overseer Matrix, it would have been a really interesting matchup. And that might just be enough to tip it in Janktivist's favor to the point where Brandon might actually decide to go with the Sports Medal instead.
Yeah, so right now it's on it's Unband who's making the decision here. So communication comes through their captain, which is Saka. So we're going to figure out whether Brandon wants to play that Apoc Hoshiko, which has some issues. It can be quite difficult, or whether we want to see that Sports Medal. We've seen a lot of Sports Medal today. We've seen Sports Medal against those big, it will again be a big, not as big as what Saka was playing, but a large World Tree deck. And we've seen that to be actually a pretty exciting matchup. It's strange, right? Like, strapped together 66 cards. A lot of them are value, a lot of them are tech cards, but then to see how those games play out, as consistent as the World Tree is, you do actually see exciting games where you're selling stuff to get other stuff, and your board state's a bit more, I'm not gonna say flimsy. It's a bit ephemeral. It kind of swaps around a lot. So I'm really excited. I really want to see the Sports Medal list, right? To see core damage, see a home, and I don't know, this is what I've been saying after playing Thule for a while, is take a bunch of those cards and put them in Sports Medal, and you generally have a more competitive and more consistent deck. It's hard to say no to the Sports Medal ability. So we'll see what Hypoxia is going to do, what Mr. Hendrick is going to do, even with open deck lists. Hendrick is a hard one to play around. How do you land a Hypoxia in this list? Doesn't it need a tag?
Yes, I think that's the news team is here that are doing a lot of the tagging.
Okay.
So oftentimes these decks, you have the news teams, and then you have something. So when I was playing the PE, I made some changes to Bridgman's list, and I put in news teams. I put in retributions, because before we had the wake-up call to trash endurance, and I was like, actually, retribution is doing a decent enough job as tag punishment here, so you don't need a lot. And I think that's what the interaction between those two is, because every single point matters when you're up against Sports Medal.
Yeah, the Sports Medal Shawl has been so solid. We saw it take Worlds. Again, Saka took Worlds with a Sports Medal list, which was a bit less Sports Medal than you'd expect. It was largely a precision design list in the Sports Medal shell, but it does give you that consistency, that card draw. It's just any ability that's really you don't feel too bad when the runner's stealing agendas feels kind of good to you. So I'm excited to see how this works. 3 fast break it's going to make a lot of sense when you have 5 cards in your deck that are fake agendas, let alone all the 1-pointers. So pretty cool. We're just waiting up on the sides again. This could be our last round. If it's not, Brandon will be in a very tense seat, having to take down 2 players of SnareBears in a row without dropping a game. And of course, this is only our first Fite Night, the first Fite Night of this year. I'm not sure exactly if there's a date up yet, but there will be another Fite Night in just a bit coming up, which will be NWE versus The Process, 2 big, largely, I believe, European testing groups. So they're going to be facing off against each other. And then the winner of today's event and the winner of that event will go on to a grand finals of similar format to this. It looks like we know that Brandon will corp is what Saka is saying again. We'll see if that gets locked in, but that's really exciting to see the sports medal list. 14 agendas, a fair few cards will say the word core damage on it, and a bunch. I think this actually might be the highest distribution of new cards from Parhelion in a single deck. Maybe. Don't quote me.
I think the big unit's saying Kuzra is currently muted on comms.
Oh yeah, I was gonna let Kisra come back in.
Oh, cool.
And commentate on the last matchup.
Hey, Jonas, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Andre.
Hey, cheers. Hey, Kat. Welcome back.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. We might have 3 more rounds. This could be our final round. Again, it's hard to tell in this format, but I'm super excited. We've seen a lot of sports medal today. It's not going to end.
Yeah.
For those who haven't or who might just be tuning in, do you want to introduce who you are real quick?
Oh, so I'm Kat Kisra. I do a bunch of art for Netrunner, and I also am somewhat decent at playing this game, and I'm a member of SnareBears.
Awesome. And hey, Jinsei, because you dropped in a bit, we didn't have time for formal introductions as well. Can you just introduce yourself a bit as part of an Unband player, as a Netrunner player in general?
For sure. So I'm based in Austria, but I was living in London for a while. And as it was like, I kind of used Netrunner as an excuse to travel. And as I was doing that, I met a lot of very strong players like Bridgman in Sweden in like a 3 or 4 person tournament. And then we kind of just decided like to form a group that was originally, I think, even like a Facebook like messaging group or something. And it just grew and grew. And then like last year, 2022 was really our year. I think like we really started taking some like big tournaments and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of Unbound in a nutshell, and me as well.
So for folks who are not familiar with this idea of testing groups, just in short, the idea is it's a bunch of players who come together to kind of share their minds, share their opinions on things, you know, share deck lists, grind matches against each other, have support for each other. I think it's a really important thing. And time again, we see some of the best players are always part of testing groups. And I think that generally works out. Those are the players who are the most engaged. But what I'd recommend is, regardless, if you can hit up some friends in your local meta, some people you met online in green level clearance, this is like a really nice thing to do. And I don't think you need to be the best players in Netrunner to come together to make a testing group that is worth doing. I think it's always worth doing. Real quick, actually, Jinsei, could you describe, where our match is going to be up in just a minute, but can you describe what exactly Unband does? Like, how often do y'all talk to each other? What sort of stuff do you do to help each other?
So there's a lot of, I suppose, informal testing. We have this whole like, you know, Discord, and then we have some deck building segments there. We open threads. We store a lot of, get people to analyze them, but well, doesn't always happen. And sometimes, and then there is just some event logistics as well, because we're so dispersed, and I think like that can be a little tricky. So that's definitely a case to be made for a local meta, and local friends is much easier to meet up in person, of course. Yeah. So some of the things we talk about is just how we want to like schedule meeting up when there is an event, for example, for German Nats or for Worlds, like, and then like, I think honestly, like Unbound first and foremost is more of a community than anything. So it's really like, we have a whole like Netrunner segment that's kind of like Bridgman, for example. Right now he's completely off on like a Harry Potter TCG. Like, actually, I'll try to link his channel later. He's going over like the intricacies of deck building and like a lot of different like trading card games. But yeah, and occasionally I even throw like an in-house tournament as well when we're really trying to like prepare. But like, I think preparation intensifies like for big events, and other than that, it's mostly just like casual, having fun. With the idea of it being, I suppose, that games on Jinteki.net, sometimes you meet like amazing strangers and you have an awesome time, but it's really about getting that level of consistency of like having friendly people to play with, and also, I suppose, a certain caliber of play, because when you're preparing for a big event, you want it to be against like the kinds of decks that you expect people to bring, and so that can be very useful.
Hey, speaking about the kind of decks we're expecting to bring, it looks like we're on. This is, I can't tell at this point. I think it's round 6. Someone correct me if that's not the case, but we're off. This is the last line of defense for Unband. Again, while the name here is Perkamus, this is Perkamus is kindly oracling for the king. For those who are not familiar, the king is visually impaired, and so it's very difficult to use Jinteki on that. If you see Brandon playing at in-person events as well, there's always someone there, or usually someone there, I reckon, who is the oracle. Their job is basically to explain board state and to help with some basic physical manipulation, but all the decisions have to come from the king. Perkamus is going to give no hints. There's nothing you can say besides this is how many credits you have, this is what you drew, this is what your opponent is doing, and we are off. This should be a very fast matchup potentially. We'll see how core damage, maybe it slows the game down for both sides if we want to respect those threats. But Perkamus, or sorry, the king, excuse me, installing a card in server 1 as another click there we drew up. Talk about mulligans. We kept. Did we both keep?
The king took a mulligan.
Yeah, it's so easy to do that. Yeah, the king took the mulligan there, so we might see a bit of a slower start. When you see that Audacity turn 1 to Luminal, that's kind of the dream. We saw an early Audacity from Sports Metal. Now on the other side of the table, we're looking at 66 cards, Route 66 of Cabanessa Wu. This is very close to the list that Deer they published on JNet. Yes. I think there might be some changes. It's hard to quickly look at a list that big and figure out what the difference is. I don't know, Kat, do you know?
Off the top of my head. Not 100% sure off the top of my head. I know we added a Takobi recently.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you what D's list was, but seems like a pretty solid start for Wu here.
So speaking of solid start, that overclock coming down off of the self-modifying code produced from Cabanessa, starting with a Reaver. Now, Reaver is a nice start. It means that if you're trashing cards in server 1 and server 2, or stealing a Hyperloop extension, mind you, you will at least draw cards when you trash things. So that's going to be 2 card draws for Brandon, and Aesop's Stone Ship coming down. This is so nice, right? You have options here. You can sell the Stone Ship chart room with the Aesop's pawn shop for 3 credits and a card, or you can just rip it on the corpse turn to draw 3 cards as you as well.
This is basically a paid ability diesel. Draw 3 anytime.
So good. And we'll see how quickly Janktabis does go and transitions into the World Tree. World Tree, very powerful with cards like Harbinger and Reaver. If you can pull the Harbingers from your deck with Cabanessa, turn them into other programs. I'm not sure exactly what programs you want to set up with. Threatening a Clod is obviously very quite good. But we'll see what Brandon can do here with 1 card in server 2 and 8 credits. A lot of options here, 8 cards in hand.
So this is probably the main difference between the SnareBear Wu list and the Unband Wu list, is that ours is running Reaver and Aesop's. Reaver gives you a very significant amount of card draw over the course of the game, especially with Aesop's, because it means that every time you use Aesop's, you're gaining 3 and drawing a card.
We're just getting an Elevagao out on the table. No D-Res here. Take that, Hikaru. Server 2, not a Spin Doctor. So sometimes you'd res it. You already have a lot of cards in hand, but that's the only card really you're excited to D-Res in these lists generally. So we're going to discard a couple cards here.
Yeah, I think Peter already commented on our initial exploration with we were testing a bunch of Reaver in Wu beforehand, actually doing big Wu before World Tree was even out, I think. And then with World Tree costing 2 memory, it's just difficult to maintain them all on the field. So personally, I've been having some success with DreamNet as a draw engine, but definitely we can see the sheer elegance of the engine of Aesop and Reaver in conjunction, and also the ability to draw on the corporation's turn is certainly a big advantage.
Oh, World Tree from hand.
From hand,
wow.
1 in 66, hitting the table with a Harbinger as well. This is a really good start. HQ, we're getting an Axis here again. There could be dents on agendas. We saw a fair bit of card draw without filtering. That Harbinger is going to be trash. We're going to get a program. It's a Clot on the table. Seeing a fast break there. Now, Clot's so important in this matchup. There's some viruses around, so Brandon can and will want to purchase out at some point. Fast advancing is the name of the game. I don't think this deck can really score out behind ice that easily. I think it's only running 4 or 5 pieces of ice. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see if he takes a time right now, whether you just, kind of take it now and hope there's no simul chip coming down eventually. But wow, World Tree from hand. This is such a good start. Brandon drawing up. Now, the cool thing about this Aesop's pawn shop list, I've had a bit of practice with them, and Deer was pointing out that sometimes the Aesop doesn't even stay around for the whole game. Like, there's a chance on this next board state, unless you pull a Harbinger, that it's right to sell the Aesops to go get a daily cast, and then later on in a couple turns, once you have something to pawn, then you go send that daily cast for another Aesops, right? With 3 in the list, you don't have to hold on to this one, which is kind of a freeing idea when you've been playing Shaper pawn shop decks, and like, this is my engine, every turn I'll support this engine. Like, you can shift engines, and that feels really good.
Right.
King.
Oh, yeah.
2 cards on the table, server 4 and server 5 here. We've seen very little from the deck. We've got only a couple accesses. We're expecting Tranquilities, but you're also expecting things like Hendrix. Mr. Hendrick, what happens if you run server 5 into Hendrick? Do you spend your whole turn, or do you just take a single core damage?
Well, the first core damage is takeable, I think. The second one probably is not.
Agreed.
But since you don't want to pick up Nightmare Archives, like, I don't know. I feel you're not quite as under much speed pressure as you would have been in the first 3 matches we saw, but I don't know.
So this is a little bit of the MU issue that you run into with Reaver and World Tree.
Oh yeah,
it would be pretty ideal for John to get out a Parisha right now to help deal with the assets, but he doesn't have the MU to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And this list is running a lot of MU cards, whether it's a Cyberdelia or just any piece of hardware can become something else, can become a piece of hardware. But it looks like daily cast, we're not running this turn. We're not getting the World Tree value, let alone, we got the Reaver value that turn, excuse me, because we did trash the face down Harbinger. We have a full turn here. 8 credits, 3 clicks. You can score just about anything. So just to explain for those who might be confused, why are we talking about core damage in Sports Metal? And specifically, why are we talking about it mattering? It matters not because it's going to deliver a flat line. It matters not because Janktivist might end up a negative hand size and lose the game at the end of their turn. But it matters because there are, I believe, only 2 copies of a new agenda from Parhelion called Ontological Dependence. It's a 4/2 agenda that its advancement requirement reduces by 1 for every core damage the runner has. So that can go down to a 2/2. It can go down all the way to a 0/2 in the wildest case, but a 3/2 is acceptable. That's kind of what you expect. So single core damage might do it.
Yeah, stock buyback being played for 1 agenda.
Interesting.
Slightly dire.
That's a bit of a confusing play, actually.
Sometimes that's all you have. You just need some money and you have an ugly hand. But seeing cards like this, like seeing plays like this, make you kind of interested to see what HQ is, right? Like it has to be a bit awkward. Flame out, hitting the table, not because we're going to use it, but because it's going to become something else. We'll see if it's a Cyberdelia or the hand size one that I forget the name of. Simulchip makes sense too.
Ooh,
that's a
good hit for John. So Simulchip presumably is here to keep the clot lock up.
Yeah. So ugly turn last turn, right? Like with 3 cards on the table with 5 cards in hand, you're assuming that the deck has some way to score the Vitruvius. Obviously, the Clot is keeping it in check. So whether the King wanted to take a turn here just to purge the Clot instead of taking the 3 credits, we'll see. But now it's really difficult. At least this deck, sometimes it can be awkward where if you're forcing the Simulchip, eventually they end up trashing a Reaver or World Tree, and that can be a big speed bump, but it's still pretty difficult. And there's not a lot of ways to bait Clot in this deck besides the Spin Doctors.
For sure. No, what I was most curious about is actually the installed cards, because depending on, like, say one of them is Mavirus, then you would have theoretically had some kind of line to score out the Vitruvius, so the hand might really be in a dire spot to force this kind of play. But we've seen the card being advanced.
Yeah, this has to be Mavirus. There you go, rezzed. For 3, this allows you to purge virus counters at instant speed to get a Luminal. Good score. One of the best you can ask for.
Wow.
That's a nice. So that Mavirus allows you to purge virus counters, and because it's the Corp's turn, the Corp can do all their paid ability windows in one chunk before handling over priority, which means that Janktivist isn't able to Simulchip back out the Clot at instant speed. Correct. That would require paid ability. So that's how that interaction works, and it's so important to understand that. We have 3 clicks left and only 4 credits, though. We know where 1 Mavirus is in archives. We're going to ice up HQ, so maybe a couple more agendas in there, and Server 6 getting another card. Just taking credit here. It's harder to play around the Sports Metal list, especially with open deck lists, right? Again, I don't know how much you have to respect that the 1 core damage, but there's a lot of fake agenda points here that could just be on the table.
Yeah, and so like we could go back down from 3 points fewer.
Very quickly, and I have no doubt we will. There's no way we're not slipping back to some extent unless Janktivist gets really lucky. There's a Mr. Hendrick new card. So Janktivist has a big choice here. As long as, and there you go, Brandon paying the 2 credits, it's either suffer core damage or lose your entire turn. You still have to trash this for 2 credits. It looks like we're going to take a single core. And there's the card, the hand-sized card, Memory Diamond getting trashed. So Janktivist on a single core damage, that's a permanent reduction of hand size. It's a second core damage that really matters.
But we're also seeing the Memory Diamond, which is part of the reason why winning through core damage is not really a realistic proposition in the current meta, I think, is between that, which is more of a generalist tech choice that also provides memory, and the new hardware whose name is eluding me, which does some meat damage and then increases your hand size, which, again, Big Wu can just like dig out of the deck very quickly. It's very hard to win through pure hand size shenanigans. Even Dr. Keeling gets significantly delayed by this.
Yeah. And Stoneship Chart Room, like there's so many ways, specifically also this, obviously this Cabanessa Wu that can pull the right card for the right, not only the right matchup, but for the right turn. So it's much, you're much more dependent, or you can rely more, on your tech cards. Red level clearance to start.
So, an interesting difference between the 2 sports lists we've seen is that this sports list requires a bit more money to score. The SnareBear version could score from 1 or 0 credits with Audacity, but this one largely depends on slightly more expensive operations.
It doesn't have Audacity, correct?
There's no Audacity.
Yeah,
so it's playing a longer game in a sense, right? It wants the runner to get a bunch of fake points, then like stock buyback for a lot of money, and then you're rich enough to score what you need to score, I think.
Or huge fast breaks. Hey, we're selling that misdirection again. 3 credits in a card is a lot of value. There is a conduit coming down. We saw this be so important in the last Cabanessa Sports matchup. Ooh. It's a bit harder in this matchup where there's a lot of traps in R&D. But this is something that Brandon definitely has to answer to, because it gets deeper and deeper. Nightmare Archives, the deepest recesses of your mind here. It's either -1 agenda points or a second core damage.
But can Janktivist afford that second core damage?
I think this is where Janktivist is going. Yeah, with Claude on Demand and Conduit on R&D, can't you just get all the ontologicals?
Maybe.
Woo! But... all right, we're taking that one though.
Yeah, evens out.
-1 point, +1 point. Now that's the first Mega Pre in any score area. So all the other 2 Mega Pre's are now 3-2 agendas for the corporation. It's like a global food initiative with smaller numbers and more cars. Sports Metal going to get 2 credits off of that. And Janktivist has that conduit loaded up. Top of R&D is only 1 card known. This is now Breaks Lock, right? Because we basically took all those cards besides 1.
But John is going to have so many fresh accesses next turn if the king doesn't have an answer to it.
And while it's that hand size is decreasing, this Sports Metal deck, it's not a deck that has like snare. It's not actually going to threaten the hand size in a lethal way, which, that is a natural lineup for those 2 mechanics. But we'll see here what Brandon is.
I was going to say as well, even if there is an ice, it probably will not stop Janktivist for long. But because there are like memory shortages right now, until some kind of hardware, I suppose the simul chip could be sold for an endurance, but you really don't want to sell those simul chips in this situation, I think. So an ice would actually prevent a significant stopgap, which is surprising to me because I thought in this matchup, like the Wu is just unstoppable. It can just waltz into any server repeatedly.
We're going to break for it though. Fast break is largely free. You spend a click, but you gain 4 credits. You draw 4 cards. You can install 4 cards in a single remote server. This will only get stronger and stronger. This deck is on 3 fast breaks, so it's not going to hesitate to just fast break whenever it largely can within some reasonable rules. But this is so important for breaking lock, for finding the ontologicals, which are now 2-2 agendas. You still have to deal with Clot, but one of the easiest ways to deal with Clot is with fast break. Install your Mavirus, install your agenda all in a single click. So we'll see here again. This might just be the bit of card draw you need to get an ice on R&D, maybe a second ice. We're not looking at any real defensive upgrades, nothing that'll keep you out. There's some stuff like Hendrik that will upset you, but there's only also 2 Mavirus, and we know where 1 is. Did we just draw 4, no install?
It's a very long think for the install.
Yeah, okay. So it doesn't do it in 1 text box. Yeah, that makes sense.
Looks like something in potentially Mavirus, or something in Mr. Hendrik.
Yep. And we'll see here whether you force out the Clot, like you can advance and still like either let them steal the Mega Pre or put a Spin Doctor on it. And at this point, if they want to pull out like a Clod, it's actually kind of expensive. All these programs are very important to their rig, and Simulchip forces you to trash something.
The King also here has the option to bluff a Mr. Hendrick asthma virus.
Yeah, Hendrick. It's a 3 of in the list, mind you. It's I think the first non-unique sys-op double advance. Well, we'll see here. Janktivist has a really interesting decision here, whether they want to pull the Clot at a very expensive cost. Yeah, gonna undo click there.
I love this fork. Oh, but we're seeing an undo click.
Yeah,
right.
No actions.
Right, of course.
In theory, you need to let a window here because it could be a 2-1 agenda. It could be an Elvigao, as much as there's no audacities in the list. So this looks like it is an Elvigao. There's no clicks left.
No, couldn't it also be an ontological in theory?
Oh yeah, ontological, huge.
It
You're
could
right.
be an ontological.
Yep,
yes.
that's the threat, of course. Undo click here. Go ahead. It looks like we might get an ontological here. And that's so big to get one of your 2 ontologicals after they've taken 2 core. Second advance. You don't have to wait here. It is the dependence. Broken off the fast break.
Oh my.
The King is on game point.
Spicy.
There is a whole lot of 2-2 agendas left in the deck. 1 more ontological, 2 more Elvigaos, let alone all the 3-2s, and the Clot had access to it, but at a very big cost. And I think server 7's more likely to be a Hendrick than anything else.
It is actually much more likely to be a Hendrick.
Yeah.
We're going to find out if it is in fact
I'm excited to
the
see
virus on this probably next conduit run.
But hey, speaking of the next conduit
run, we'll see a lot of cards here.
These are all new cards, mind you. I think it was largely new anyways, but we did draw 4 off the fast break. HQ might have some stuff in there, and that's Elasma Virus.
Yep.
So that is server 7.
Oh.
Yep.
So for 3 credits, we're resetting the conduit, dropping the King down to only 5 credits. But that means that there's no more fast advance that you have to worry about. All of the fast advance stopping stuff is in archives. There's an Elvigao.
There's big deal. We might be waiting a while for that one.
This is not a big deal.
There's a big deal.
Oh, wild.
I guess with the stock buyback, you could get into big deal range next turn, though. Or
it's
like
possible.
The turn after. And my read was there would be another stock buyback if the first one is used so quickly, but we'll have to see.
So you could find news teams here, right? And like news teams, I feel like you could take the tag. The only punishment is the Hypoxias. Hey, speak of news team.
Right.
So we're going to take the tags here. The Hypoxia,
I think John will just take the tags.
Yeah. And you trash that. The Hypoxias are weird because they drop you to 3 core damage, which means it's actually kind of really difficult to clot ontological. You have to clot on every install. So we're just hoping to lock R&D here, but now we have a 1-2 agenda in the deck.
I think you would be so happy to find the second ontological here because you're kind of safe.
Yeah, you're so safe
that
if you find it.
Probably one of the best hits for John here.
And then at that point, you take all the core damage you can, right? Like it doesn't matter anymore. Hyperloop.
Oh. All right. We're also seeing a keeping of the tags here, yeah. So
yeah, I think
I was kind of curious. You go.
An interesting play is the King could have an agenda on the board here.
Yeah.
I don't.
Or you fast break with 5. Advance. It's a Mega Pre.
Doesn't matter. It's already been on the board.
Good game.
Wow.
Can't clot that.
Oh, cannot clot
Masterful.
that. A lot of times you put these agendas, the Mega Prees and the Hyperloops on the table and you just leave them there, right? You want them to steal the first one to set it up, but imagine sitting there just sweating it out while they're smashing into R&D, getting to 5 agenda points, eating all your traps to the face, and then saying, please, just end your turn, please, I need to score this. And you get it there. So it looks like Unband is still going to continue on. Hey, good games to Janktivist. We have 2 more players left on the SnareBears facing off against just, again, this says Percomus at the bottom, but that is the King. Or Percomus is oracling for, so we're gonna have a couple more rounds. Well played, both players.
I think we're probably seeing Ag Infusion pick here because that's going to be very, very difficult to navigate. But what a game! Wow.
So now it is the SnareBears that can pick what their matchup is. Again, the King is the last player on the Unband. We've seen that Sports Metal deck. We saw how the core damage actually works into that list. You saw how the Hendrick technically mattered. The ontological technically mattered. Like, it was good. It has some threats that the players are playing around whether or not you see them on the table. It changes the game entirely. Now on the runner side there, we got the king has an apocalypse list. This is very, very standard. This is what you expect. It does have a bit of a modern meta leaning with 3 no free lunch, 3 pinhole threading. Pinhole threading makes a lot of sense in the matchup anyways. It's the sort of card that it allows you to deal with some of the defensive upgrades you're worried about, let alone stuff in the remote server. You can keep that down without having to spend too much money, hopefully in the early game. And the no free lunch to deal with the tags. We haven't seen any tag-based decks so far. We've seen no NBN. But we're going to see that soon. So now the SnareBears decide. Kat, what do you think? What do you want to pit up against what Brandon brought to the table?
I suspect we're going to see Egg Infusion.
I'd love to see it.
This runner deck of the Kings is very all in on the APOC, which is not something you want to play into Egg Infusion. The Egg Infusion ability does some very difficult things when you're trying to APOC. Running all 3 servers is very hard. Plus, Nanovis Grid makes running archives a nightmare, and in addition to that, you have BioVault. This is probably the worst corp to try to APOC.
Oh, it's so bad. It's going to be really, really rough potentially. I'm just excited to see this, not so much because it might be a one-sided matchup, and it might not exactly be, but more so because this has a lot of new cards in it that I kind of really want to see, right? Like whether we see a VNChan kill, that's always exciting. If you're not familiar with Nanocivic Grid, it's a new grid that came out in Parhelion, and it says when the runner is about to, I believe the text is approach the server, you can reveal a face down ice in archives, and do they encounter the ice, or it just subroutine fires? I forget what it says.
The subroutine just fires.
The sub fires, yeah.
Which means if you're holding... Sorry, go ahead.
Colloquially also referred to as the Nani grid, the Omae wa no Shinderu grid. Very, very mean. Very powerful too. We've been doing our own exploration of this, and initially like the Turo combination is also together with the Keeling is very fun because you can do 2 instant core damage with it.
Yeah, just that pressure from hand, right? Like Keeling brings the hand size down, and then if they ever get nannied into like a Bathynomus, that's just 3 net damage. And you know, you might eventually survive those if they're just tempo damage, but if it's just lethal damage, there's no amount of steel skin scarrings that are going to bring you back from that. So got a really cool place. We also have Divert Power, and while this is not a Loki list, sometimes the most important thing you can do for Egg Infusion is get your meanest ice rezzed ASAP. It also allows you to reset Keeling, right? It buys you a turn with Keeling in a really kind of okay way, I guess.
So Divert Power is going to be pretty strong here because you de-res Anemone, and then you can re-res it, which makes APOCing an absolute nightmare. It also speeds up Keeling, so you have 1 fewer turn to deal with it.
We got 1 BioVault, you know, you saw those also in the old Egg Infusion decks from Worlds, and it's just another kind of cherry on the top against an APOC list. So Brandon has some work cut out for him. If we look at his list real quick again, this list isn't running Hippo. There's no reason to have like that, you know, bespoke, I'm going to destroy 1 ice when your list wants to destroy every single piece of ice on the table with Apocalypse. And that's such an important card. Actually, Hippo is really interesting against Egg Infusion. Hippo inherently threatens the outermost ice on his server. You can go break that ice fully and then trash that ice. But this is not a Hippo list. So the Egg Infusion can feel really safe rezzing the strongest stuff on the outermost.
Yeah, I think as well, I'm almost assuming we won't see too many runs until it becomes critical, although with no way to gain additional clicks as well, even I don't think we'll see an APOC this game, would be my best like estimate. So it's really just the hope of like finding the agendas in time through accesses.
And speaking of accesses, all we have here is we got 1 Mad Dash, super important. Mind you, this Egg Infusion list is running very few agendas, some very big agendas. So you can end up stealing 2 agendas and winning. Just like the Egg Infusion list we saw at Worlds, so much of it was scoring an early Obokata, right? Before things got really out of hand. And we have Stargate, and Stargate's great. You got that pressure on R&D. You gotta have to still run archives, which can obviously be tricky with Nanocivic Grid and all that other nonsense. But Mad Dash plus Stargate early might convert, let alone you just get 1 or 2 good runs in, you could close the game out.
True, but also like trying to get the Mad Dash off and then getting booped is like, ooh,
it's really hard.
That hurts.
Yeah, you gotta bait it out, and you saw some players just like doing we saw it also today with Odal, like just firing Mad Dashes. Sometimes it's not a card you know is going to stay in your hand for that many turns with some of the like unpreventable damage from a lot of the ice reses from the Nanocivic. So sometimes if you have it, you might just fire it and hope. It makes it a lot more awkward, excuse me, for Egg Infusion.
Yeah, I think if the Mad Dash connects, the king is favored.
Oh yeah.
I think if it doesn't, then he has a problem.
Yeah, so much
That's
of it.
basically what's going to happen with this matchup.
Yeah, I think I was going over the list and I was like, is there maybe a Katorga breakout in here? Is there a way to like get the APOC back after it gets trashed off the anemone? But there is not, sadly. So
yeah, Katorga
it's gonna get.
It's a cool card for the APOC list, right? That gives you that safety. You have one labor rights, right? So at the end of your deck, you can put some stuff back in. It's still really hard. Like, I don't think against a Jinteki matchup with Obokata, let alone the fact they can de-res, re-res their anemones, you generally don't want to be at the end of your deck. But yeah, you have a bit of flexibility. You can lose one or two key cards and still kind of pull it back. It's going to be slow.
And as a longtime Jinteki player, this is something people don't often consider about Hoshiko, is that Hoshiko kind of mills the deck, like slowly, progressively. You're essentially forced to draw whenever you've accessed something. And this was kind of the logic behind the Bridgman PE list as well. It's just like, it wasn't on the grind plan mainstay, it was more exploiting the ice suit, the MK Ultra being very bad against sentries. Yep. But I think there is an element to that. It was even like more so with the Max in the past, and then we saw like the Grinder Palana as a response to that. But it's still to some degree there that a 45-card Hoshiko deck will eventually run out of cards.
Yep.
And it looks like
you eventually hit a. Sorry, go ahead. You will eventually hit a point where the Hoshiko ability turns into a problem for you.
Yeah.
So we.
By the way, Kat, we're in the tournament lobby. If you haven't found the game.
So, that's where you went.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's hidden. So we're off. Welcome. This could be our final round again. Up the top, that's Perkamus, who's oracling for the king. King is playing, and they are the last line of defense for Unband here. This is D. Deer was the player who published that list, that, you know, the big old Cabinessa deck, and we expected D to play today, but they're playing something a bit different. They're on Ag Infusion on the Corp side at least, and this ability, you're going to have to do a bit of technical explaining of how this works. This one's a bit tricky. 17 influence for those who are uninitiated. Said once per turn, instead of rezzing an approached ice, you may trash it to choose another server. The runner now encounters the ice on the outermost of that server. And encounter is such a big word here because it means that you don't have the ability to res ice. So you can only redirect them into rezzed ice. That will hit. They can't jack out. But if the ice isn't rezzed, they can jack out. That's an Anti-Civic Grid.
Right.
Hit it on HQ. That's a new
card.
That's
a big hit.
That's a really big hit. There's 3 of these and a Spin Doctor on the table. Sometimes it feels bad to trash stuff. You know it's just going to come back, but it's not something you want to allow them to have access to. How much in this deck is just drawing a lot important, just to make sure you have face down cards and archives? I guess with Ag Infusion, you don't really have to sweat that part, do you?
Too bad. There's also the thing with Ag Infusion, you can just use the card to boop the runner and then use that same ice for nanny.
Exactly, yeah.
So somebody in the chat is asking, do the commentary team think we're beyond the endurance era, or asked if we made a conscious effort to diversify the lineups for this event?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I have a solid answer. I think it's, so this event specifically, we have to see every single archetype, like every single faction. So inherently, if endurance is only in 1 or 2 factions, you're not going to see as much as it. I do think some of the best decks in the format are still definitely running endurance. I think whether we're going to see lists like, I still think it's worth playing into Ag Infusion. So I'm not 100% sure. There's definitely bad matchups for this, but this is specifically a weird meta where you want to be a bit flexible, but you also have to play every single faction. So I wouldn't say we're beyond
I really want to hear Kat's opinion on this, because for me, like, I was looking at the UK Nats, like the things SnareBears brought, and this already looked like almost post-endurance. Like the 419 was definitely not on boat. It seemed like the meta clustered around R+, which bouncing the boat was a very strong play.
I think R+ was at that time so meta-defining that it caused people to move off endurance, because having the time and tempo to install an 8-cost console is not something you can always afford to do against Drago, whereas Paragon is getting you continuous value every single run, and it pays itself off in 4 runs. Well, 4 turns of 4.
Yeah, if you watch the UK Nationals, you see at the top table is exactly what that matchup looks like. You're seeing a lot of 419 without boat against, R+ with Drago, and that's, I think, specifically to deal with that exact deck. But Hoshiko?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Deer is on stream as well right now, and I'd be curious to hear their opinion on it, because like the I think what might be happening is a reintroduction of an endurance meta off of World Tree Woo, where endurance is just a piece in the whole deck rather than your central strategy. So from my point of view, I think like endurance still remains something to contend with, but we now have other meta-defining cards such as World Tree that seem to warp everything around them more so than endurance ever did.
We got a remote up here. Again, Spin Doctor has just been on the table, not threatening it out here. While you can return 2 hedge funds or a hedge fund and a civic, we're going to set up here. And again, setup is a really interesting thing here because the window of time that you're able to apocalypse and then the value of that apocalypse, it fluctuates pretty drastically throughout the game. We're going to go ahead there, moshing through, getting rid of Steel Skin to draw some extra cards, Paperclip and Black Orchestra. We're playing Anarch, so looking at the bin is really important to understand these breakers can be installed when the runner encounters the appropriate type of ice. Paperclip for Fractors, Black Orchestra for Code Gates. So that means that you're not going to see Brandon install a lot of actual breakers. You're going to keep them in the bin and only get them when you need. So while it looks like maybe you're not threatening a lot of ice breaking, you can. It will be expensive, but that's always an option there. And speaking of expensive, we have the Fermenter brewing along.
Yep.
It's kind of a hard card to purge out individually, but at some point you could consider it later on.
Something that is a bit of an issue here is that the Anarch Heat Breakers are very poorly positioned against Jinteki Ice. While the King will probably be able to break ice to some extent on like seeing it with the Heat Breakers, it's going to cost him a fortune.
Yes. Some of those numbers, Anansi, I think it's 9 credits over install. Black Orchestra, or sorry, DNA Tracker, I think is also 9 credits. Pinhole threading here, love this. This threatens both the Spin Doctor and potentially an Acid or upgrade.
Yes, this is a very good pinhole.
Yeah, this is fun. So pinhole threading, you don't have to pick a target until the run is successful, which means it technically threatens every single target. You could be brave and say, I'm going to leave my Spin Doctor. I think you're going to go for Server 2 or vice versa, but it looks like...
Ooh, is Server 2 another Spin Doctor?
I think they just moved it. Yeah, just to protect it, right?
Right, but that's a curious decision.
Yeah,
okay.
It's interesting with their double. But Rashida is such a good hit that you don't have to deal with their ice, let alone let Ag Infusion res their ice.
I think getting the Nanocivic back is such a big thing that they can't risk it.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense because 2 Nanocivic is just so much more powerful than a single one. And especially as we've seen a pinhole being thrown out, we're going to be facing fewer of them going forward.
So part of what makes this Ag deck interesting is that it has so many pinhole targets, it's actually a bit difficult to deal with. What you're trying to do is you're going to put 3 Nanocivic on, let's say, Archives, maybe R&D, and then your remote server. And then you're going to res Keeling in your remote server and say, well, come deal with this. What are you going to do? You can't pinhole through Nanocivic Grid. So you're going to have to hope that maybe you can pinhole through HQ, but with the Ag ability, they're just going to keep bouncing you. And it becomes a mess.
Part of what makes it even worse, I think, is that like when you get pinholed onto the server with the pinhole target, you can no longer use the pinhole on the target.
This is difficult.
The pinhole has to be a different remote.
All 4 servers are iced up here. So not only is it going to be difficult to get Hoshiko online, you're going to have to deal with ice. Now, the question is, which server has the worst ice? Because that's the one thing you're trying to avoid. Admittedly, with Divert Power, Ag Infusion has a bit of flexibility of what they can D and re-res. But the question here is, if you find that Anansi, you find the DNA Tracker now every other central run, while it does cost an unresed ice, is going to hit you into that. And so it looks like the King here is going to just money up massively. Popping Liberated, flipping back and entering a Fermenter, 26 credits, starting that turn on only 7.
So
that's what the Epoch Hoshiko can do. Just a lot of money cards.
So I'm curious, this moneying up seems to indicate that they're going to try for an Apocalypse.
Yeah, they'll try. And speaking of moneying up on both sides, now 23 credits. Again, APOC is near impossible to land this turn. There's no way to gain clicks, and you can always just, throw them into the Regolith server, which means that this turn they can't do it. You can also wait, like res an ice, force them through that, res an ice, and then last click, throw them into it. Maybe you don't even have to res the second ice there, but...
So the problem here is if the King hits, let's say, a Chiashi on one of these. And D gets the Chiashi res first, every face down ice can now potentially be the Chiashi, and it will also stuff APOC.
Also, like the ice that's already installed, the first ice we saw installed was on R&D. So I think this was just whatever was in Deer's hand to begin with, because they were maybe like worried, okay, I don't want to get Stargated and have all my ice trashed. Whereas everything else has been a deliberate, I think, positional ice there.
I think that's true.
So the ice on R&D to me is a bit more random than like what everything else might be.
We hit an Apocalypse in the bin.
Yeah, moshing.
Which might make sense again. You might have multiple copies. Sometimes you want to keep multiple copies if you're worried about losing them during the APOC runs, but this might just be, hey, we're going to try and win off Stargate Mad Dash. That being said, we have a Stargate in the bin, so there's only one more left. You're playing this nice
there
and
is,
slow.
but the logic here is that you have the
labor rights?
Labor rights. Exactly. So this is part of the magic of the labor rights, is that it allows you to trash an early Stargate with the moshing, because you know you can always get it back later.
It's just so hard, right? Like if you're you can have to do it in the mid part of your deck, right? Because if you're at the end of your deck, you can no longer deal with Obakata. Anemone is an issue, so it's still really difficult.
So,
not in this matchup necessarily, yeah.
So looking at this deck list, a full like half of the ice will cost Brandon over 10 credits to break on the first go.
Yeah. And that's a Nanocivic Grid on Archives if you've ever seen one. This card is so hard to deal with on Archives. It's self-protecting.
And that's probably a tier, right? That's been discarded, perhaps.
Oh yeah, maybe. Something was discarded, and you can throw out any ice, right? Like you don't have to rely on Ag Infusion. And again, with Nanocivic, you just do the subroutine.
Honestly, on this board state, Rezzing tier is also perfectly fine.
Yeah.
True.
D has plenty of money to afford it, and if you've ever tried to break tier with MK Ultra, it's an adventure.
So this is such a big change of gears, right? Like we saw so many sports metal matches where you have to go fast. They're threatening something every turn. And Deer is probably not going to threaten an agenda for another 3-4 turns. They probably want 2 ice. I don't know if they have to rely on their Bio Vault. They don't have any other defensive upgrades, but they know they can just play slow, because the only thing they lose to is Apocalypse or like a really lucky Mad Dash Stargate.
Yeah, and also, like, I'm not even sure if you're going for a score here, or if you just start, like, advancing the Keeling and then like just slow rolling it, and then they, at some point the runner has to trash Keeling, and then you have a great scoring window to go for whatever you wanted to go for.
Yeah, whether you even have to, like really force a line where they have to eat some anemones and then you push out an Obakata. I don't think you're in any rush. I like the Keeling play a lot. I think the Keeling is like you're force them to interact while also not taking on a lot of risk, and that allows you to get your ice rezzed, which is exactly where you want to be. So we'll see if Deer draws into them. They're not tutorable, but there's 2 in the list. Just drawing up, playing this real slow. Again, this is a timed match. And when it comes to time, whoever players on more points, whether the king could just mad dash to get to 4 points and force Deer to score at 2 agendas, that actually could be a relevant line. Not that you are playing to time. You shouldn't do that. Server 2, Nanocivic Grid or a Bio Vault. There's a 1 of Vault. And I think we have seen 3 Nanocivics now in rotation, assuming 1's on Archives. Yeah,
and if there is a tier in Archives, then like contesting this becomes really, really tricky. And even if you do, the Kakurenbo is just gonna turn it back to face down.
Yeah, Kakurenbo. Seeing play competitively, I rue this day. But it is a very important card when you need to flip all your stuff, let alone get a Bio Vault back or what have you. King drawing up. Again, we have that no free lunch on the table. It's not so much the tag, it's just some credits if you need it. Offshores it. Looking at the bin too, we haven't found an MK Ultra yet. Is that going to keep Brandon back from running? Like, can you just not run without?
I think so.
Almost definitely.
Yeah, because if you hit a tier, you have a huge problem.
Yeah, Anansi, a problem as well. And we're looking on we're on 3 of each bin breaker. So while I think we've seen the majority of all the other breakers, we haven't seen an MK yet. And that's the bottom of your stack. You got issues. You just have problems.
Okay, so with this many credits, the runner can effectively run everything they want, but with the Nanocivic on Archives, potentially another one on Server 2, it's going to be pretty hard for them to actually pull it off.
Server 2 could be Keeling, could also be Rashida. I don't expect it to be another upgrade. It doesn't really make that much sense.
No, it could be a Bio Vault.
Yeah, potentially.
It could be Spin Doctor. maybe Rashida. My read is that there might be an enemy on HQ, which is a very elegant position to have it in, because as soon as the runner is running there and you're worried they might snatch your agendas, you can just ditch them away, insofar as sculpting your hand in response to what they're doing.
Yeah, Anemone is a really hard one to play around, especially if you still expect yourself to steal Obokata or sometimes deal with a Nana Civic to do sudden damage. But we're just clinging to credits. This is an absolute Cold War. At least we have an MK Ultra in the bin. So with 50 credits, we might be ready to run, and ready to run is where you need to be here. That's Dr. Yenshin Keeling showing up from Parhelion, gaining the power counters a bit faster than you'd think. Again, we're resing this on the runner's turn. So it gets a power counter there, and then a power counter start a turn. Now, the reason it doesn't make it faster, but it forces hand size to go down to 4, which is something that has to be respected by the runner. So we have to discard another card here. All right, they're talking it through, but there's a really cool window here to res Keeling after paid ability windows, and now you have a couple turns before the game closes in on you.
And once again, you go.
Go ahead. I was going to say, this egg deck is actually reasonably capable of scoring, which is something that I know the chat had been talking about. Keeling reduces your hand size to the point where scoring Obokata becomes very viable.
Yeah, that's super cool. You can just like, I'm not going to say tempo Obo, but you don't need to ice it up, barring unless they keep like, a steel skin in hand and really do something wild.
And I think you kind of, sorry.
Right, but even just forcing them to contest a Keeling, making them spend their resources, spend their cards to do that, you now have a window in which to score.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see here again, one face down card in Archives. Ag Infusion's ability hasn't been relevant, no res dice, and this defensive upgrade largely has to be an Civic. If it's a Bio Vault, it doesn't matter. So the question is, when do you run this? Next turn, your hand size will be 3, then 2, then 1. 0 is an acceptable hand size, but -1 is not acceptable hand size. And then on top of that, you start sweating out the small ice. Like the fact that eventually Anemone becomes an unbeatable proposition seems like a real problem.
Yeah. An enemy does, and also, 2 random core damage off a Tyr can also kill you. And I'm not sure if this list is running Bathonymous.
2 of them, yeah.
It is. It's running 2.
Yep. So that can also become a big problem.
I think go ahead.
I was going to make the overarching point that you kind of have to have a scoring plan as a Jinteki Ag Infusion Glacier deck, even when you're running Keeling. And that is, in my opinion, because the Wu decks can tech against the hand size constriction in such a way. Say you're getting 4 extra hand size, and suddenly you have almost all the time in the world to deal with this.
D's drawing up. It looks like they're going to stack Archives.
I think, trashing ice. You don't often see that, but that's probably just to get a Nana Civic ice into Archives. I don't think you have to do that, but that allows you to give some flexibility with your installs. That's
an interesting play.
Yeah, that's an interesting play. So I think next turn, it's really easy to say the king has to tilt and start running. And I think tilt is not the right word. It just, at this point, even if you're not ready to run, you probably have to consider running, whether it's this turn, probably if not the next turn. So we're going to have to see some forced interaction. And that's, I think some people looked at Keeling and thought this was a problematic card. And it's good that there's cards like this that force interaction for sure. But it is technically answer or die.
So something that's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Super briefly, I think it opens scoring windows. The Keeling does, right? Like you can contest it reasonably, but then the corp has a scoring window, and that is something important. Like some people of Unband were like, corp's been kind of missing like these corp win cons, and I think Keeling's decent enough. But you go ahead. Sorry.
All right, I was gonna say, so here the king can actually very safely run R&D. Because D's not going to res that ice, anticipating pinhole.
Yes.
So basically, any one ice server that doesn't have a Nana Civic behind it, you can now run, which is R&D.
Immediately,
if R&D is something like an Anansi, that
hard.
could be so expensive that
maybe. But the king has 50 credits. It's fine.
No, you have to
happily run through Anansi multiple times for a pinhole here.
So we're drawing up here. We're going to see what this ice is. Can be Anemone. And then we're going to see what Nana Civic Grid feeds you. Again, Nana Civic Grid it's a tier. Okay. All right.
Ow.
Okay.
Well, that's going to be some of the money.
All right.
Some of the 50 credits.
7 strength sentries. This is a good old fun time to if you were not familiar, realize how boosting and breaking subroutines works on MK Ultra. It's important to know that only once you have match strength, then do you start breaking subroutines. So you're actually gonna have to boost twice and break no subroutines. So to break this thing fully, which you don't actually need to do, I believe it's 12 credits. I did that math fast, but I think it's 12 credits.
It's pricey.
Damn.
And there's still a nanny grid behind that.
Yes, at least you won't get ag infusioned. So the nana has to get a hard end the run. How many hard end the runs are there in this list? There can't be that many. I'm checking right now. Magnets, Thimble Rig, that's it.
Chiashi.
Oh, Chiashi too.
Chiashi has an end the run.
Huge.
Tier optionally offers you an end the run as well.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Tier also has an end the run. There's a non-zero chance that, assuming there is a tier in the bin, D just opts to give them the 2 core damage.
So we'll see here again. If you do click through this, and you can click through it, you are going to give clicks. And giving 1 click to the ag infusion, not that important. Giving them 3 clicks, yeah, that's important. They can score on agendas from hand.
12 credits for tier.
Woof. That's why you have 50.
Ouch.
We're through. There's the Nanocivic grid. This will fire when the runner approaches. You may turn down a face-down piece of ice and archives face up. If you do, resolve a subroutine. I believe this window is correct. Yes, approach server, same as like Managarm or Anoetic. Should be good.
Yep.
So we'll see what ice.
I think, if possible, they're going to end the run here, just because it's so obscenely expensive to force the runner through the tier over and over and over.
Yeah, I think you need to end the run here. I don't think you want to do tempo damage, especially when they have 6 cards in hand and their hand size is bad.
So the question is there an end the run in archives? And that may be a reason to trash the archives ice.
I think that's why they did that. They had this was to prep a Nanocivic without forcing them to use the ag infusion on this run. So we're going to continue in. Again, we have money to trash both of these cards if we can get in. Let's see if it's a hard end to run. And you can just go back. The thing is, like, can you just keep tanking through Nanocivic?
Ooh.
It's an what?
They chose to do core damage with tier. That's interesting.
Wait, the deck has 2 tiers?
Yeah, the deck has 2 tiers.
I didn't know that. Oh, the deck has 2 tiers. That's cool, I guess. All right, 2 core damage. So hand size permanently lower.
Something very nasty happening here, where like a Kakurembu gets played, turns the tier face down, puts maybe the Nanocivic, like depending on, or maybe the healing back.
So that server has disappeared. While you did lose the reduction of hand size from Keeling, you just gained your own reduction in hand size with 2 core damage. For those also watching who are not familiar, the 2 brain damage subroutine. Core damage is what brain damage used to be, so they function identically.
So the interesting thing is here that D let them have that trash. They could have chose to end the run there and make them run through the tier again. There you go.
Oh no, Kakurenbo, spend your whole turn. Okay, so you have to spend your whole turn as a triple, and you can trash any number of cards from HQ. I believe we trashed none to go ahead and install a card from archives and put 2 advancements on it. Now this card doesn't have to be an advanceable card, does it?
No. It can be any installable card inside the
It just has to be in a remote.
So that means you can get the Keeling back, and it's worth noting those advancement counters aren't power counters, but they might look like power counters. It doesn't make the Keeling faster. But you can use this either to firstly flip all your cards and archives face down, so the Nanocivics are more strong, and then recur either a Keeling or a Nanocivic. It's your whole turn, but it's a very powerful recursion.
If
There's some
this is
elegance with the Biovault here as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yes. So if this is the Nanocivic, they may have another Keeling in hand.
Yep. Now, 32 credits is still a lot. You can just run through that and trash just about anything. Again, we talked, it's 12 credits to go through.
Right.
That's not even half your credits. It's a lot.
However, if they run through it and that's a Nanocivic again, and they take another 2 core, they have a huge problem.
Yeah.
Yep. It might have been an agenda trashed out of HQ as well, because at this point it might be safer in archives than
Very
it is
likely,
in HQ.
What's really cool is D redid that so that they could trash a card from archives. Even if you just trash a card that's not impactful, it gives the idea that, again, you could have trashed an agenda. Again, this could be a quote-unquote tempo Obokata. It doesn't actually change the cost. It technically, it's the same. We're pinhole threading. We're hoping that's an upgrade. Now, of course, if you pinhole into the tier, you get that awkward situation, Jinsei, you're talking about where you can't access the card.
So the question is, how many pinholes do they have in hand?
We've seen 2 so far, right? There can only be 1 more. But yeah, do they have it? Who knows? Anarchs are not very consistent on their draw.
Yep.
So we're seeing here, D has to decide. Again, if you trash that ice on R&D, R&D will be open for the next 3 clicks. They will be forced into the tier. We're raising a Nana Civic. Can you jack out here? I reckon you can.
You can.
Yeah. You probably should, because otherwise you're just taking
you
another 2 core damage.
So it's interesting that they didn't throw them into the tier. That seems to indicate that server 2 is not a Nana Civic.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's either a Keeling or an Agenda, right? So here we can jack out.
Likely.
Now, it's worth knowing that you can't jack out until you've encountered a piece of ice or approached a piece of ice, and they did approach an ice, so they can jack out during the run, but otherwise you cannot jack out until at least 1 ice has been approached. Or not ice. Sorry, you can jack out on an empty remote server, so you can always jack out before you access. Drawing up here, 4 cards is what you want to access R&D if you are betting to steal Nobakata, which maybe is your best shot here, but you always want to access from centrals with 4 cards if you can afford it. This deck doesn't have snare, so it's not like you're going to flatline out of nowhere off a central access. It's more so just making sure Obakata, a 5/3 agenda that requires you to suffer 4 net damage.
Yep. So there's a non-zero chance that if the king tries to pinhole here and server 2 is a bile vault, that they just can not really pinhole again for the rest of the game. And that's going to be a bit difficult.
Top of R&D. We got 20 minutes only left. Again, there's a bit of time extension because the oracling process isn't very efficient. 31 credits. Again, we have to discard 1 card here, and there is Keeling back. There's 2 numbers on there. Now, one of these is actually going to take a card out of hand.
Yep. So the king down to a hand size of 2.
Okay.
Very interesting choice to get the Keeling back.
So this is a bit tricky. The top number, the one that's covering the doctor's face, that is the amount of power counters. The bottom one, that's advancements. They have no relevance in this game. It's just they had to come back like that. So hand size is now 3. We have 2 core damage plus 2 reduced hand size. It should be 2 now, right?
Hand size is 1, I believe. Like it says 3 out of 1.
It is 1 at the top of the corpse turn when Keeling gains another counter.
Yeah. But
however,
it's 2 on their
turn. At the end of their turn, it should have been 2, so they would have needed to discard 1. Ooh.
This is really frightening. If that is an Nana Civic, you cannot run this anymore. You have lost the game if you can't win off centrals.
Yep.
You saw the power of the core damage from tier. That is a lock.
But you can still run this now. Like you can, because you only lose the game at the end of your turn when you have a negative hand size. So
yeah, but if you trash, I see what you mean. Yeah,
sure.
Probably there's enough end the run ice to make it so that you can't.
Yeah, there's probably some end the run ice in there now.
Now there's 11 face down, and again, I hope you all had open your note taking, your notepad.exe, because we know some of those cards. We don't know all of them, so there was still a fair bit of mystery. There's about 4 to 5 unknown cards. We know that there's a tier in there with an end the run, so you don't need to worry about anything else. But how do you win? Like Obakata is their 4 net damage. You have 1 hand size. Shikodo getting a credit, or sorry, getting a card draw at the cost of a credit. That's a nice start. 30 credits seems like a lot. Access to all your breakers, but it's just, again, singles. 2 Apocalypse out. It's impossible
Money
to
is only going
Apocalypse
to
this
matter.
turn.
Yeah. Money doesn't matter as much as you wish it would in this matchup, I think.
So the best you can do is run R&D, eat the tier, break the tier, and then jack out. And then you can run R&D 3 more times, and you have to steal every non-Obakata agenda. You can draw once, maybe. But then you need the Mad Dash. It's hard.
So the king can safely run R&D 3 times this turn if they want, because D is not going to pop the R&D ice until they see the pinhole.
That's true. Yeah, if you play around the 1 pinhole, you might just throw them into the tier to buy yourself a window, but like you have to steal basically every send a message or 2 send a messages and a longevity. It's in the realm of things that could happen. It's obviously incredibly unlikely, but like there are lines here. Drawing up to 4. That's going to respect the Obakatas. Now, if it's just even like an anemone on R&D.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't APOC this though because of the Nana Civic, right?
Yeah, there's no APOC. Well, there's a pinhole APOC line, but it's messy.
We're going HQ. Only 6 credits here, and it's been a couple turns. We've gone through about 24 cards, so the chance of there being agendas in HQ is actually pretty high. We've done very little filtering with Spin Doctor. There's actually might have 2 agendas in HQ. You can steal the Obokata, but again, unless you have the Mad Dash, you're going to need to steal 3 agendas.
Oh yeah, if Mad Dash,
Obokata, that's a
it's
start.
played on R&D. Ooh,
that's your
right.
whole hand.
You need to steal this.
Yep. Ooh.
So now, if you top deck the Mad Dash, you can't
the Mad Dash is in the bin.
Yeah, not like you can play it into
How many
Aghanim.
labor rights left?
0. The one that was in the deck just got trashed.
So draw
1 Stargate in the bin, 1 Mad Dash in the bin. That's gonna be rough.
Yeah.
Draw. So we're gonna discard all but 1 of these cards. Then next turn hand size will be 0, and then it's not game over until the next turn, which will be -1 hand size.
Right.
So
unless we see a divert power here to accelerate the clock.
That is possible.
That's really funny. Yeah, I think the best card right now, well, not the best, but a really good card is if they can just find a Anemone. Like, that is such a hard card for the king to deal with. Yeah, this is quite mean. Again, 3 power counters plus the 2 core damage, putting them at 0 hand size. The king, he has 1 card in hand. Again, hand size is only checked at the end of their turn. 15 minutes left in the round. Drawing up here. Again, I do think there's agendas in HQ. It's been
definitely
many turns. Whether there's now 1 in archive, and I do think the agendas are just safer in archives. I think discarding the archives agendas into archives is the safest bet.
Right.
So if they have been Biovault in hand, that could have also been a very nice additional remote installation here.
So what's out? We have 1 more pinhole.
Yep.
All the Mad Dashes are out. You need to steal 2 more agendas. Again, you're going to have to steal 2 more agendas no matter what. You have 2 cards in hand, which is exactly what you need to respect Anemone. You can't steal Obokata, so it's just to send a messages. Luckily, there are more of those left than anything else. You can't run archives, because if there's a Bathynomus, you take 3 net damage. Let alone 2 core damage means you'll lose at the end of this turn, and you still can't steal Obokata.
Yeah. And ideally, you want to defuse the Keeling as soon as possible, I feel. Next turn, it's just going to be harder than this turn.
Yeah, this is the last turn, right? In theory, for the runner. Oh, it's second last. Like, they still have next turn, even at -1 hand size.
There's minimum 2 turns left.
Unless Deer is hit by the curse of every Ag Infusion player, which is R&D betraying you. That looks pretty favored for them, I think.
It is very possible. This Ag Infusion deck does have the advantage, though, of having very safe archives for being able to store agendas.
This is quite mean. The king there. 4 credits, 29. Sorry, 4 clicks, 29 credits. You can't really ask for more than that, but I still don't know. You have to get so lucky on R&D, running it twice, maybe trashing something, finding a send a message, 2, maybe the longevity. But you have outs here. It just kind of is a heart of the card situation.
Yep.
Well, if there's anyone who has the heart of the cards,
yeah, right?
In my book, it's the king.
Both Stargates are in the bin, so that does make R&D access a lot worse.
Yep.
It's only single accesses here. And again, this
in
deck...
this instance...
Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, in this case, the advantage of Stargate is that you see 3 cards, but you definitely do not want to bin the agenda.
Yeah, you need to keep it there. Now, whether the Stargate would just get eaten by the Ag Infusion, likely. Still, we're thinking this out. Again, I think there's a big understanding here that Brandon only has at most 2 turns left if the Keeling survives. There's 1 more pinhole threading, and D is going to respect that.
Yep.
But you need to get your accesses here. It's also with 2 cards in hand. You know you're going to discard down to 0, so you kind of just want to go. This deck, mind you, doesn't have snares. It doesn't have Chrysalis, so you don't need cards on access. There's a chance here you can drop to 4 and then run R&D twice, so you can steal the Obokata. It's interesting how those numbers work. Is another potential access worth being able to steal 2 of the other agendas in the deck? Probably.
I think the additional draw here is necessary just not to die to a Bathynomus on the Nani grid trigger. Now the question is, do you want to go into archives here,
I don't think you
defuse the
can.
entirety of it?
Well, no, because you'll just get end the run, right? By a tier or something.
Yep.
Yeah, probably.
You just get end the runs.
Like, I think it's R&D or HQ. I don't think you can run any other survey.
D drawing up on the last turn indicates they were probably dumping agendas into archives from HQ. So HQ is probably much less appealing of a prospect now.
Yeah, Nani on archives is unassailable. As long as you have, you know, Kakurenbo resets the whole battery on this thing, but you literally can never get in. Barring pinhole. So Brandon, think this one through?
That ice trash we saw earlier for the tier really coming in handy here then, I think. Like, depending on whether that was the tier or some other kind of end to run ice, it's really paying dividends as we're seeing, I feel.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited. I wasn't expecting us to see a potential Keeling kill here, but those walls are closing in. We have still a fair bit more time here. Drawing into a card here. In terms of burst draw cards, moshing isn't really card draw. We've seen 2 Steelskin Scarrings so far. So there's nothing to do better than draw for a single card here. There's that 4th card here, so I think we're going to see some runs. The question is whether it's R&D or HQ. You know you're going to discard your hand anyways. There's no real card you want in your hand. You just want to make sure that you can steal the Obakatas and also, to a large extent, not die to flatline to the Anemone. So we'll see if we poke some centrals here. 6 credits. That might be D, all they need. Again, they can still reroute into the tier. That will be one of the clicks on the run if you want to keep them out, but then you can go back. So we're going HQ. I think this is risky, right? I do think if they have an agenda, it probably goes in archives. We'll see if we find something here. It's a Regolith.
Yep.
It's 3 to trash.
You trash that and try to make HQ better?
Yeah.
You have near infinite money, honestly.
It's hard to spend 29 in 2 turns, but against Ag Infusion, you could imagine it.
Yeah.
It's like running into the tier twice, honestly.
Yeah. Now with 4 cards in hand, they can, if you run last click, they can just throw you into the tier. You still have to break it. At that point, you have to throw your entire hand in the garbage. So if you have this Obakata fuel, you have 1 click to connect. So we'll see if D is going to Ag Infusion this action. Now, they'll have a full turn after that, so they can just put any ice on R&D or on HQ wherever they trash. And they don't have to be able to threaten to res it to still have like good defense using Ag Infusion's ability.
They just have to prevent the runner from stealing 6 in 1 1/4 turns.
And time is getting close, and this is really awkward.
Yeah.
Because D is probably not going to be scoring out agendas, is going to rely on the killing to win.
Yep.
So we have 10 minutes left in the round with the extension.
I call this the Ag Infusion effect. The like, it's highly unintuitive too, right? Like, ooh.
Whoa, what?
Whoa! Archives. So this turns the Keeling. I'm pretty sure that King wanted the Ag Infusion ability to fire in the last run, because now you can just reroute the pinhole threading. You can put it literally, well, you have to put it on the remote server for it to be good. But if this connects, this just does lethal. This does 2 core damage. You can't go through the Nana Civic. Thimblerick just ends the run, though.
End the run.
Oh, the 2 core damage wouldn't be lethal. Yeah, you have to end the run.
Yeah.
That's the last pinhole.
No. Wait, that was the last click.
Yeah.
If they hit them with the tier, that would have been lethal.
No, because then they would trash the Keeling, right? So they would get plus 4 hand size.
That's true. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's
so if D can survive this turn,
Spin Doctor to draw. Just has to survive 1 turn again. Looking for an Anemone. If you can find an Anemone, you know they can't run anything, and it's just 1 more turn here before that Keeling becomes negative hand size. And at the end of the turn, you see in the top left corner, grip says 0 out of -1. Negative hand size is only lethal when you end your turn and fail to discard down to negative hand size. That's a bit of an existential problem.
That's interesting.
That's really good. This is such a powerful card with Nani, because if you have a bunch of ice, you can just put it in there and then like fuel the grid. I'm not sure if it's necessary here, but definitely opens lines for some very good plays.
On the art, we're literally fueling the grid, huh?
So yeah, so they know that there's no pinholes left. The runner pretty much never gets into archives if there's 4 ice that say end the run on archives. So they probably put as many agendas as they can with those 4 ice and archives and just sit there.
Yep. And here you're strong, I think, for Anemone. Is unassailable. Like they have to draw a run, and they get one good run on, and you know they don't have mad dash. With only a single run, they can't win the game unless they can deal with killing.
They cannot. They have to steal 2 send a messages.
Exactly.
Which is they're probably honestly all in archives right now.
Yeah, and now also with the spin doctor too. That's a bigger tax. This is so hard. Again, negative hand size. There's only 4 more clicks here for the king to figure out how to steal 2 more agendas, and 2 of those in the deck left are Obokata. 12 cards in archives. We know at least 2 of them are ice, I'm pretty sure. The Thimble Rig, the only face up. Well, we know more of them. We've seen a couple of these. There's actually we know half of them.
D right now is credit perfect to res an Anemone and res the last Nanovisk on server 2.
Getting that card draw with Hoshiko.
Yep.
Something was accessed? Oh yeah, HQ. Draw up.
Yep, draw up to not die to Anemone.
And now you make 2 runs. Yeah, there you go. Run R&D. You have to get really lucky on these accesses, but you can do it. You have 3 clicks. That's actually 1 many, and you can trash and see deeper. Top of R&D here. Again, all the agendas are so many of them could be in archives. That's a send a message.
Ooh.
You just need 1 more access here. The king finding it now, an ice can get rezzed. That definitely helps, but with 27 credits, access to all breakers, this is massive.
Need to you might I guess you can res the archive slice.
It's a Pathonymous. You break that for 3.
I'm surprised by
I'm surprised you res it. Yeah, I don't think
I think you don't res that unless there's nothing left in R&D they can get.
Yeah, I don't think you res that unless that. So maybe everything's in archives, but otherwise that is a redirect, which is more powerful than a 3 credit tax.
Right.
Hey, message sent, you know? It's not in here. Go somewhere else. Just bugs. 2 clicks left.
It's also tough because you can't last click run HQ. You just get booped.
Yep. You just got to find the one last send a message here somewhere on the board.
Oh, there's a longevity too, right? So I think there's only 3 more agendas.
That's true, there's a longevity.
But I do think archives has to be loaded.
For
Go
sure.
R&D and hope. And you can run on R&D twice now with that res, right? So you can always trash a card, see deeper. There's not that many trashables left, but 6 agenda points. You just know 2 clicks from now, you fail to discard the hand size. We're going R&D. Let's go. 3 to break. Money doesn't matter. Can't get a boop on the res dice. Has to be an unres dice. Eye Confusion off the top. Spin Doctor being used.
Oh, that suggests that there are stealables in R&D.
Oh, no. 2 unseen cards. Most of them were. So this makes the density hopefully not favor agendas if you're the corp. Unseen card.
The maximum is 3 out of 19. Yep.
No steal, no trash, which means the top of R&D is a known thing. So now all you can do is run HQ and that will get redirected. So this should be game. I don't think there's any way out.
That's game. There's nowhere left the king can access a card.
That should be a lockout here. Again, we're going HQ. You might as well shoot your shot.
Yeah.
You just get booped into R&D here. I think this is 100%
or
safe.
Anything really.
Yeah. I think archives is a safe.
Pay through the tier 1 more time.
How would you like to end this? Oh no, GG. Good game from both players.
Went down swinging.
That is going to be it. And while you might be saying,
GG.
It might be confusing saying oh, you can get through the tier. You can. We're assuming that's the non-civic grid, which will just fire and end the run from the other tier that's in archive. So it's a 12 credit tax to get nowhere. But wow, that was a tense game. This is the other extent of what we saw, sports medal for most of the morning. You can get your accesses. I'm still going to go fast. And this was, hey, no. There's big ice everywhere. It's all going to hurt you. Core damage flatline. There we go. I think you take that. I think you do shoot your shot there and hope that it's not a Nani-Civic. I think it's very likely it's a Nani-Civic, but there's a small chance it's not. I wonder if that you should run that regardless. I think you should. I think you should see what that is. Why not? See, it's a Biovault, right?
The thing is, if it is a Biovault, which would be brilliant, I would commend that play. Then you just boop them into R&D, right? You don't.
Yeah. You don't give them that chance.
Yeah, but it's such a tough matchup. And you saw, the King saw it, he kind of given up on the Apocalypse. This is a very, very hard deck to Apocalypse, and still playing to 6 agenda points, playing to his outs, and D just going to take it there for the SnareBears, who, that was getting close. That was a really close game. I've seen Fite Nites where it goes 0-4. We were very far from that. That's quite a show put on from both teams. Congratulations to both teams. Again, this is just the beginning. There are more Fite Nights coming later on throughout the year. We are gonna, I think there's another round and then a finals, but that is going to be it from the SnareBears. We saw 3 players again at the games across the day. We did not see Cable Carnage showing up on Reality Plus. We saw no NBN today. And for Unband, we got to see most of the deck lists, which I think is actually pretty satisfying. I think we saw more Runner than Corp perhaps, but
we really wanted to show off our Ag Infusion as well, so that's a shame. But we saw one very nice Ag Infusion game here on stream as the last game. Yeah, huge congrats to all the players and also to SnareBears. Very well played, and these were all like super exciting and fun to watch. So
yeah, wild games.
Looking forward to more.
Yeah, this is great. Again, huge for all the teams to take time to participate this, to put on largely a good old show match for all y'all, to show off Parhelion. Huge shout outs obviously has to go to PSK for organizing this event and getting all this scheduling and all this stuff together, deck lists. There's a whole lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, so huge shout out to her. And of course to everyone on the mic, Jinsei, I know Will, you were waiting in the wings, we never got to hear your voice. Kat, to everyone else, we talked to Peter and to Jonas. Thanks so much for joining me here. Do stay tuned. Again, there will be news on posted on Reddit in the Discords. There will be another Fite Night. There'll be 2 more coming this year, so check that out. And of course, call to action next week if you want to watch some more competitive Netrunner. It is the Circuit Breaker Invitational. It's all next weekend. I think it's a 2-day event that will be on twitch.tv/nullsignal Netrunner. So go over there if you haven't. Subscribe, hit that follow button, and you'll know where they go live or when they go live on Twitch. I think that's all. Yo, do you guys, two of you here, do you want to plug your, just give a shout out maybe to whatever you want to, and or your testing groups, because they performed hecka well today. Kat, you want to take it first?
I don't actually have anything to shout out other than how well my team played. So congrats, everyone. Well done.
Hey, cheers. Jinsei?
Same. We're really proud of our performance. Like, winning's nice. SnareBears played it amazingly, but also just like, it was really fun. I think the choices as well and everything, like even the end. We're just honored to be part of Fight Club, I think, and hopefully there'll be a chance again next year. And otherwise, yes, I will plug Bridgman's kitchen meta channel. Everything but Netrunner, apparently, but maybe some of those deck building skills will still be transferable to Netrunner.
I'm excited to check that out. And for those watching at home who are not part of a testing group, I highly recommend make your own. Talk to some people with like-minded ideas or different ideas, probably more impactful. And there's a chance in a year, maybe you'll see something like this, which is really, really quite exciting. Kitchen Meta 2991 on YouTube. Awesome. Thanks, Sanjay. And that's it for the stream. It's really exciting to get this quality of a tournament in this short period of time, which is phenomenal. But enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see y'all in a bit.